Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if the first thing you hear are these beautiful chimes in the background, this is not the bells from the church in Manchester, although I might think it is. This is the backdrop with my dear friend Clive Farrington. Thank you for being here, buddy.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's really a great pleasure to speak with you again after, well, last summer was the last time I saw you. So it's always a pleasure to see you. And of course, we have a great time on tour and stuff. So
You
really
know,
nice to see you.
as I sort of thought about the conversation that you and I might have, I went through previous Facebook messages and stuff that we were bouncing back and forth, and we have so much fun when we're out. And I think we there's a whole bunch of like sort of carrying on and like some tomfoolery, but it seems like every time we finish up these tours, there's this recap message that I've gotten from you that talks about the true value that we bring to each other.
Yeah.
You and the band. It's amazing, man, how much fun it is on stage to watch you, and backstage. It makes touring such a dream, So
Yeah.
I feel this longing, to be hanging out with you now. If this is the way that we get to do it, man, then
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But what's really great about being on tour, of course, is, and I think you mentioned it about Mike as well. Mike's score gets a little bit, I'm sure it's nerves that kick in just before going on stage and stuff, and the same for me and Andrew and stuff. But we feel really, we feel at ease, but being able to come into your, some artists, of course, keep away from each other's dressing rooms and stuff and let you get on with stuff. But we feel honoured that you allow us into your dressing room and to be able to have a bit of a laugh, if you like, just before we go on stage, and it kind of breaks the ice, if you like, and takes away a little bit of the nerves. And I know you've mentioned before that Mike likes Andrew and I coming in and jibing him up before he goes on stage and whatever.
yeah.
But it's
taking a piss. That's what you said.
Absolutely, yeah,
right?
yeah. We do. It's a Manchester thing, or Liverpool and Manchester.
It's definitely that region.
Yeah.
You're from Manchester.
Yes.
And Andrew, we talked a little bit about Andrew possibly joining you. He's obviously 8 hours ahead, and he's, so I don't blame him for not making this call.
No, he had to get an early night.
But I love the idea that we can heckle him and not get a rebuttal.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. We can talk about him now, can't we? Without him, like you said, without him rebuttaling.
Yeah, well, we can take a piss in Andrew's behalf. So, no, but he's not from Manchester, is he?
He is.
Oh,
He's
really?
Weirdly enough, I was talking the other day with him. He actually sent me this thing of Manchester bands. It was like a poster with all the Manchester bands on, and we're not on it. So, and that's kind of the reason for that is we're actually from South Manchester. I'm from Cheshire. I'm from a place called Altrincham in Cheshire, which is South Manchester. So anybody that's from actual Manchester, kind of, it's that right. We have that rivalry thing going on, Who do you think you are? You're not a Manchester band and all that sort of stuff. But right next door to us is Wythenshawe, which is Manchester, and there's a lot of Slaughter and the Dogs and all. The big bands. Sad Cafe came from there and stuff like that. So there's all these big Manchester bands that we were not really part, even though we were part of the scene and we used to go to the Hacienda and everything else. We're not really classed as a pure-bred Manchester band. Andrew's from a place called Bury. They pronounce it Bury, and it's spelled Bury, and that's north of Manchester.
Okay.
Which has its own postcode, so that's a separate place again. So, but we actually met in Manchester. That's just before we'd formed When in Rome, Andrew and I met at this wine bar where we used to go to before we'd go to the Hacienda and stuff, and got talking. And then he started, I don't know whether you know about Andrew, but prior to When in Rome, he was a beat poet, what's known as a beat poet in the same style as a guy called John Cooper Clarke, who was a really very, very big beat poet back in the UK.
Right.
Back in the 70s.
Oh, he's 70s. Yeah.
Late 70s, which would be the punk. He was like a punk poet, if you like. And Andrew was the same. So they do all these political poems. And I started doing backing tracks for it, for his show.
For Andrew's
show.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he'd have these like Kraftwerky style tracks going on behind this poetry that he would recite just before Bow Leisure, the band that I was in before When in Rome, would have him opening for us, and reciting his poems and
No
stuff. And
kidding.
yeah, so that's how we kind of got to know each other. And we were looking for a lyricist for When in Rome, and when we formed When in Rome with the ex-keyboard player, and he came to mind as being because he wrote poetry and stuff,
Right.
good for the lyrics. And as far as The Promise is concerned, I wrote the first verse and the chorus, and then we had it on cassette of the verse and the chorus that I'd sung. We never wrote that down. We never wrote the lyrics down. I sang that directly into a TIAC 4-track cassette
Really?
thing, and we sent it down to Andrew. It took about 2 weeks. Of course, there was no internet then, so it would by post. Sent him this cassette,
Oh my God.
and he obviously listened to it and then wrote the second verse. So his verse, and that's how we continued to write as When in Rome. I'd write
Really?
the opening lines and the chorus, and then Andrew would complete it and maybe change a couple of mine to make it fit a little bit. And of course, we got the deal on that. We got the deal on a verse and a chorus before Andrew had written the
Oh, wow.
second verse. So
Caused a little rift between you guys. I'll bet you can arm wrestle about.
Oh, absolutely, we do the lyrical arm wrestle. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool because I still send him stuff now, and he's very, very honest with me. And he'll say that's not really for When in Rome. But I've still got it in the armory, if you like, for maybe young bands may want some material or whatever. So, but it's we still work really very, very, very well together, honest with each other, and then. The other day, I unearthed some old demos that we did for the second album because Virgin Records, who we were signed to, paid for us to go to this place called Ledbury Mews in Notting Hill in London, and we had this beautiful like apartment, a Mews apartment where we set up all our stuff, all our sampling gear and everything else, and we wrote the second album. And so we actually wrote the second album, and by the time we were ready to release it, the record company got whatever happened. The record company got fed up with us, or we got fed up with the record company, and we got dropped by the label. So we've still got all of those tracks that we produced back then
Really?
in our armory, if you like. And we've got a country one. It's really weird. We wrote like a country song. And it just came out, we wrote in that way. We wrote spontaneously, we wouldn't write in any style,
Yeah.
And hence the album. The album has so many different genres on it, because there was 3 people in the band and we're all giving our own thing. And I would say that The Promise came from me because I was a programming guy. I liked sequences. I'm a drummer originally.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that Promise, the drum loop is really unique, man. I love how percussive, and it's a really interesting part. When you hear bands,
it's very difficult to play as a live drummer, I imagine.
Yeah.
But I've never tried it myself. I daren't because it is quite a complicated kick, drum, and snare thing that's going on.
Very syncopated, but
but that was the way I did start. I mean, I guess you could say that in a way, hip hop goes in that kind of way. It's like a fast hip hop beat, if you like.
Yeah.
When we released it, there was people saying, "Oh, it's a great dance tune," and it was big in the dance clubs. And I thought I tried to dance to it and I couldn't. But when you see the guys that could dance to it, it was just like it made sense, So when we went to New York, we actually played Studio 54 in New York, and there was guys hip, what do they call it? That dancing when they're spinning, break dancing, spinning on their heads and all sorts. It was great to watch, and I totally understood why it became so big in that area. It became big in the dance clubs and stuff. So we've been very, very lucky with it. That one song.
It's you know what? In the first 5 minutes that we start talking, you've given me more history than I ever expected to even get into. This is really cool because I knew something about the formation of the band and the way that the songs are constructed, but to get to this point where you've developed another songwriting partner out of someone who was a lyricist that was opening for you. I would imagine, because the relationship part is so important in a band, right?
Absolutely.
And when I see you and Andrew out, not only on stage and behind the scenes, but hanging on the beach in the Dominican Republic or, hanging out in airports, you guys are hanging together.
Yeah.
Tell there's a lot of respect there between the two of you. That's even though, I haven't seen any kind of disparate personality kind of conflicts on the road, but I can see that there's a genuine sort of respect for each other's contributions to the band. And as humans, it's important to see because, you think about how a band is like a relationship
Yeah.
with a life partner, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of those relationships end, in fiery deaths. And it's I think it's remarkable that you guys can go out and weather the storm. And I mean, when we're touring, right,
Yeah.
there are a myriad of things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my favorite thing is when you're out touring and you and Andrew are driving separate, right, in between the bands, and
Yeah.
you're cruising through the desert, and you'll post these videos singing along. You'll put
Yeah.
on a song on the radio that I don't think you guys know,
No, we don't. No.
but you but you mouth the words, and you're acting out these parts like to ridiculous country songs, and I don't know how that started, but for me it was one of my favorite parts of touring, because I'd tune in. I think it's on your Instagram. Is that where you're normally sharing?
It was on the Farrington and Man Facebook page.
Oh,
We
okay.
posted them to, yeah. And yeah, it did fun stuff. And I guess it's driving on and we enjoy it as well,
Yeah.
and it's better. Driving is way better than being on an aircraft, and because of course you can't do a lot of stuff like that on an aircraft, and
without getting arrested.
Absolutely. So what we do is we tune into different stations. We go the woo, you get to tune into all the different stations, and we'd hit one and we go, there you go.
and then let's put it live and make sure that we just
Absolutely. I mean, humility is the most important thing in all of this. In if you're in any kind of band, you've got to know that there is humor to this. It's not a serious business, and it's not stuff like that. But you should always have fun. You should always have fun with it. And the day that you stop having fun, then I think it might be time to look at something else. But we've never really stopped having fun with it. And the respect that I've always had for Andrew, I mean, when I first met him in the wine bar, before we met, just before we were going to the Hacienda and stuff, and I'd always known him in the background as being a real stylish guy. He always wore really nice clothes and everything else. And his best friend was a guy called Willie Hunt, who's got I actually shared a flat with him in London, and he's a very famous designer now. So, and I've had a few suits off him as well. And in fact, Spandau Ballet have been dressed by him. Martin Fry's been dressed by him. Tony Hadley's been dressed by him. So we've always had this kind of thing about style and everything else. And we see that as going hand in hand with the music, and without being a bit over the top, you can say it's a bit dandyish and foppish and stuff like that, but it's not anything to do with that. It's us feeling good as well. It's not us wanting to say, oh, don't we look fucking fantastic? Excuse the language, but don't we look great? But it's nothing to do with that. It's about feeling good for ourselves. I was. Did you read the Dave Grohl thing that he wrote about when the concerts came back?
I saw everybody sharing it, and I love him. And
it's fantastic. And Bruce Springsteen, he was backstage with Bruce Springsteen, and he said, "I'm really nervous, and Bruce Springsteen's coming back to say hello to us and stuff." And he came back and said, "Your set was fantastic. I really enjoyed it." He said, "Just remember, every one of those people out there or you should see yourself in every one of those people out there, and every one of those people should see themselves in you." And if you lose that connection with your people, and I think that's what we get a lot of comments about that. Andrew and I are very, very, we don't mind going out in the audience after the show and stuff like that and saying hello to people. We don't sit back in the dressing room and mope and think, oh God, we've just done a show and stuff.
Right.
We enjoy doing the show, and we like to meet the people afterwards, the people that have paid the tip for the tickets, if you like.
Humility comes along with that in a lot of ways. So, you talk about that being an important part, and you mentioned the style. I don't see anything pretentious or pompous about that at all. I've loved the fact that you do come off with an air of sophistication, and it does make you stand apart. You talked about Martin Fry, and you talk about Tony Hadley. You're right. All those guys have the sophisticated English look about them. And I think it contributes to the show in a really positive way.
Absolutely.
You don't see people mailing it in, right? They're not showing up in, flannel shirts and just acting like they just came off their job at the factory and they're working on stage, right? You're there as an entertainer and to perform, but then the humility, the part about you engaging, it's not even just after the show. I see you guys out before shows. I see you conversing with fans online. Your social media engagement is really cool.
Yeah.
Being inclusive with your fans is really important,
Absolutely.
For bands like ours. that
Yeah.
had made a mark in the 80s, and
Yeah.
then 35 years later, having people still, they're buying tickets, they're flying
Yeah.
into shows, they're getting hotel rooms, they're
Yeah.
finding people to take care of their kids or whatever else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Staying connected with them and appreciating what they
Yeah.
do.
We learned from some very, very good people. Brian Ferry, David Bowie. You know, both those people had humility. People think these are the big superstars and they're untouchable and stuff, but they're not. David Bowie was probably had the most humility of any artist that I've ever known.
Did you know
When you
Dave?
see, well, no, I never got to meet him, but of course he was one of my. I wouldn't say heroes, but he was one of musically. He's a very, very big influence in both Andrew and I.
Sure.
And of course I've seen a lot about the stuff, and Andrew tells me loads of stories. I mean, there's a thing on YouTube where he's being interviewed, David Bowie, by a guy in Yorkshire, a Yorkshire guy, and he's talking about he produced Mott the Hoople and stuff.
Okay.
And he was saying that they were going on Top of the Pops the week after they were recording in a studio in Soho, and they went upstairs to have a smoke and stuff, and David Bowie joins them upstairs and said, listen, next week you're on Top of the Pops. He says, I want you to dress in a silver dress. I want you to put eyeliner on, and I want you to put blusher on, blah, blah, blah. These lads are from Hull.
Oh.
They're like working class guys, you
Yeah.
know. So David goes, right, I'm going to go back down and get this work done. And the lads went, no, we're not wearing any of that anymore. We're not wearing that. If he thinks we're wearing that on Top of the Pops, he's got another thing coming. So, of course, Top of the Pops comes around and Mott the Hoople go on with All the Young Dudes, which became a massive hit all over Europe, all wearing what David Bowie had told them to wear. And he said from then on, he couldn't keep them off the blusher and the eyeliner. He said, where's the stuff? Where's my eyeliner? The band really got into it, of course, because it became number one all over Europe and stuff like that. And the humility of David Bowie is just like an example for any musician, really, because people see him as this great, because he is, you know, by far the greatest songwriter, I think, that's ever lived, and still, obviously, he's made a massive mark and a great example of humility.
Sure. He loved to. He was self-deprecating and made fun of himself a lot too.
Oh, absolutely.
Nice, right?
Yeah.
The Ricky Gervais series of extras, right? When the episode, I know you've seen it because it reminds me so much of other people that I met in the business, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The Ricky Gervais character, you know, still.
There's so much of that. I love Ricky Gervais, fantastic.
But that episode with Bowie, sorry.
Absolutely. But you've got to watch, what's her name now? David Brent on the Road. Have you seen that?
No.
It's Spinal Tap all over, but a British version, if you like.
Okay.
With Ricky Gervais. Fantastic.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it too close to home? Does it feel like
it is a little bit?
Our tours?
But there's a funny part in it where he's hired. He works for a company, but he's in a band as well. He's in he does full-time work that is not in. That's not anything to do with the band. And he takes a vacation. He takes a 2-week vacation and decides to take his band on tour. And so they go all over the country, and they hire this big bus, and he's driving behind. There's a camera shot where he's driving behind the bus. He's the singer of the band.
Okay.
And he's driving in his own car behind the bus, and he says, "Oh, I thought I'd just let him have the luxury." It's brilliant. It's really good.
I have to see it. David Brent on the road.
On the road.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
BBC.
It's not like me and Drew on the road. It's a perfect example of us on the road.
I love. Well, people can feel like that's what it's like to be with you. That's good. You know, one thing that I know that a lot of people that may watch this have seen Lost 80s live, right? And see the presentation that you guys have. And this is really cool. I mean, I got to give huge props to what Rob Juarez has put together for this package. If you haven't seen this, the best thing about seeing bands from the 80s, right, in this environment is that you get to see 5, 6, 10 bands that all played songs that you grew up with. Right?
Absolutely. It's fantastic.
Like right now, when the world is upside down with this global pandemic, I've mentioned this a couple of times that you see people that are normally a little grounded becoming a little ragged at the edges. They're kind of coming apart at the seams, and they need the escape. And that Lost 80s live festival environment is really an opportunity for people to cut loose for hours and just leave all the stuff behind. And, when they come out and they hear the intro piano sequence to The Promise, and the lights are down, they've got a little fog, and you come out and you and Andrew do the call and response part of The Promise, I can put myself right back there again. And I talk to people that see that on tour, and it's almost like people feel like they're a part of this community of all these bands. You talked about hanging out backstage. It's almost like people that continue to go to these shows are part of the family. It's a huge family reunion. The
Yep.
bands are all hanging out. We all love to hang out with each other, and,
Yep.
and then the fans that come out there, it's hard for me to call them fans, because honestly, they are more friends than fans. In
Absolutely.
A big way,
I just love it when somebody shouts, "Hey, Clive!"
Yeah, yeah, and it's not,
and it's somebody that I've never met before. It's really nice to that they appreciate the stuff and keep coming to the concerts and stuff, and hopefully, I think it will come back. I really, really do think it'll come back. And once this is all over, I think it'd be bigger and better than ever, because people will want to celebrate. But I don't know how they're going to do it. It's a bit weird, really, isn't it? Because how quick it's going to happen, I don't know. Is it going to be 100? Is it going to be 100 people venue to start with, and then a 200, then a 300, and then they're having festivals again? As Dave Grohl said in that thing that he wrote, he said there's no way that it's going to go away, because people are that we are community. Whatever the word is, we like to be in a. Is such a word.
You froze up for a
together,
second.
If you like.
You froze up for a second, so you were just saying.
I'm sorry, mate. Wait, as Dave Grohl said, he says that I don't think it will ever go away. This the festival, the big festivals and stuff, because people naturally want to be together and they naturally want to have fun together, and hopefully that's sooner rather than. I think it's going to be 2021, but I think it's going to be bigger and better, and we're all going to celebrate that we got rid of this evil stuff that's going on at the moment.
I'm with you. I mean, it's tough to speculate, right? It's hard to guess when we're going to be able to do that stuff again. Yeah. I know that shows that we've had booked together have again been rescheduled. We had some stuff that rebooked in Catalina, right, for September.
Yeah.
To me, I wonder if that's a little too soon, or if that can happen. I'm hopeful, because that is a smaller environment for that sort of exclusive thing where on the island we can all take the boat over together and party.
Absolutely.
And what an event, right? I mean, just to be in that space, 20 miles off the coast of LA, but it feels like you're in coastal Italy,
Absolutely. It'd be really lovely if it does come off, but I think it should. Let's put it that way. It should come off, I think. It is bad, this that's going on, and of course you've got to, wherever you go, you've got to put this thing on it. It's very, very hard, and the thing that really pisses me off more than anything is that people policing each other, people saying, "Oh, why did you do that? Why did you do blah blah blah?" It's still, we still live in a free world. If somebody wants to walk down the street without a mask on and they're not near anybody, then do it. But
that's kind of what I mentioned. I mean, the people that are kind of coming apart at the seams, people that would normally not be that combative or judgmental, you do see people, because it's happening at the same time that politically there's a lot of polarization, right, where people are sort of at each other's throats too. And if you think about the true essence of the community and the people, that escape that we all have at the festivals is that we're accepting, we're celebrating people and their differences, and really instead of we celebrate or acknowledge how different we are, we celebrate the commonalities, right? And so if we have common characteristics of being decent human beings,
absolutely,
for me, that's what I love. When we go out and we're doing these tours together, you notice that, like, the musicians that we're hanging with, there's a like-minded sense of so many of these musicians, like beautiful, spirited human beings that are backstage, and we're on performing the show. And then we go out and we meet these amazing people that I've considered some of my best friends just from the tours, outside the bands, just on the road. And I think that's really what's going to be an impressive thing when we come back out. Whatever we end up doing for shows, you're right. People are so ready to recharge. And in this time too, where we're stuck at home. I feel like for me, the silver lining has been that I've been forced to slow down and focus on things that are positive, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
we could all be victims, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody on the planet right now is a victim, right,
Yeah.
of this thing. But if
Yeah.
you don't play the victim and you really look at, okay, what I was doing in the past, what are the things that were contributing to positivity and quality in my life? And maybe I was focused on things that just didn't matter.
Yeah.
And for me personally, that's been great because I can start to chop those things off and just slow
Absolutely.
down. And,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
doing things like this, you and
Yeah.
I would be hanging out, talking backstage for a brief chunks of time, and they're really valuable time
Yeah.
for me. But we get an opportunity, even if we're talking through a Zoom conference,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
nice to be able to know that you're being productive, you're working on music.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get too lofty in that conversation, but it's exciting to see that it hasn't slowed you down in a way that you're still caring about people, you're still communicating with people. I see your social engagement, man. It's a cool thing. So
Well, you know what? I talked to my daughter more than I ever did back when I was living back in Manchester. You know, I mean,
really,
yeah, I talk to her every day. My parents, I talk to every day. So it's, you know, sometimes it's good to be away. You know, to be away from. Yeah, I don't say it's good. I still miss my family and everything else. But I speak to them more than I would if I was back in Manchester. I phone my mum and dad every day. I phone Saskia every day, my daughter.
she's
Yeah,
she's
she's
beautiful. She really is a
yeah,
wonderful.
I'm very, very lucky. Yeah, yeah, I'm very lucky.
Well, that's the saying of absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Absolutely.
It's a true thing,
Well,
right?
she's
So
coming in June, so
is she?
hopefully, yes. And I checked with the airline yesterday, and it's still going. So she's on her way over.
Right on.
But going back to what you were saying about the, you know, know, for me, it's I think you implied it earlier on where you said these bands that you grew up with and the hits and stuff like that. To share a stage with bands like Human League, Martin Fry, ABC, Flock of Seagulls, um, all you know, all of the 80s. I think we've toured with most of the still successful 80s acts, Mark Almond, and you know all the big 80s acts that have stayed the test of time, if you like.
Yeah.
Um, these bands that are still continuing are the ones that have got got the heads about them and really taking control of their own um, management and everything else. Because
Right.
the problem happens for younger bands is that when you get involved with too many agents and too many managers and stuff like that, where the manager might not have your best interest at heart, the agent might not have your best interest at heart, and I think it's most important that you look after yourself. And these bands that we are touring with, Mike Score, for instance, you know that Mike's his own boss. There's nobody that tells Mike what to do.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's pretty much the same with me and Andrew. There's no manager saying, you've got to be there at this time. You've got to be. We do it all on our own. You know, we look at the roster, we see what time we need to be places and do it properly. And of course, when you're a young band and that's not what's on your head, all you're doing is wanting to play the music and everything else. And thankfully, we've grown old enough to be able to know when to say no, if you like, or not do too many gigs not wear yourself out too quickly,
Yeah.
So we're very, very lucky in that respect that we're still in this climate. We have our health and everything else, and hopefully many more of them.
You mentioned luck, and I've talked to a bunch of people about this too, because I go back and forth between really feeling like it's luck and fortune. I think a lot of opportunities are self-driven, right? I mean, you've put yourself in a lot of the position that you're in right now to be able to make decisions and be able to call the shots.
Yeah.
So, but there's probably an element of luck there. But I wonder if it's you're fortunate or if there's truly, this magical thing, whatever it is. It's great that you take advantage of that and not take it for granted.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned younger bands and what they're doing this way. Let's go back to the early days. Were you in a position when you first started out with the band, even pre-Andrew, where maybe you jumped at the opportunity to take opportunities in a deal that didn't work out the best because management or labels took advantage of you?
You know what? I mean, I've auditioned. I've auditioned as a bass player I've never played drums in a band, even though I would say that's probably my first instrument because that was the first instrument that I started to play.
Right.
But I got interested in the bass because, of course, after watching The Jam,
At the jam.
Bruce Foxton, the Rickenbacker bass. So I bought myself a Rickenbacker bass after that. But the way that I came to play bass guitar was really funny as well. I worked at an engineering factory in Altrincham.
Okay.
In between times. This was before I had, way before When in Rome.
Okay.
And the foreman in the factory was looking for a bass player because his bass player, he was in a little cover band, a local cover band. And they were looking for a bass player because their bass player was ill and he was walking around the factory. Does anybody play bass? Blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, no, sorry, mate. I do play drums. And they had a really good drummer. Graham Mather, his name was.
Okay.
So he was going around the factory asking loads of different people whether they played bass and stuff. And then he came back. He says, are you sure you can't do it for us? So I said, go on then. So I went out on my lunch hour. I went to Woolworths and bought myself an Epiphone semi-acoustic bass guitar.
At lunch.
And I got them to transpose all the songs to E, A, D, or G, so that I didn't have to do anything with the left hand. I just played everything.
Open strings.
With, open strings. So they transposed all the songs to E, A, D, and G. And I went out and did a few shows with them. And I actually joined the band for a bit. That was kind of my apprenticeship, if you like.
Yeah. Was that your first time on stage?
Pretty much, yeah. We were doing the working men's clubs. We did the proper apprenticeship. Where we played these. I don't know what the equivalent is in America, but working men's club was exactly what it says. If you worked in a factory, an engineering factory, this is the place you went for a beer, and all the beer was cheap. It was subsidized by the unions and everything else.
Oh, really? Okay.
So we would play these places. We got chucked out of places doing our own stuff.
They wanted your covers.
Yeah. Well, then I joined a band called Bow Leisure after all of that, being in these little cover bands and stuff. Bow Leisure played our own music. We wrote our own music and played our own music, but stayed on the same circuit.
Okay.
So we were doing working men's clubs, loads of them, it's play us something we know. People be shouting at us and play us something we know. But it was a great apprenticeship because it got us to learn how to be on stage and to handle if anybody gives us any grief on stage. And I kind of study that a bit as well because the film The Heckler, I don't know whether you've seen that. It's a great movie, but it's how to handle if you're coming off not too well on stage and stuff, and how to banter with people and stuff. And so that interests me quite a lot. And then I worked at a hotel for 10 years between Bow Leisure and, in fact, after we'd had the hit, The Promise, we lost the record deal and everything else, and we weren't earning any money from the record. So I got a job at a hotel and stayed there for 10 years working in events.
Okay.
Setting up microphones, speaker systems, and lighting and theming rooms and everything else.
Really? Was this back in Manchester again?
Manchester, yeah, at the airport. Saskia was born in 1999, so I thought I better get a proper job because I'd been I worked with John McGee up from Public Image Limited in between times, and Glenn Gregory from Heaven 17, and John Keeble from Spandau Ballet, the drummer. We had a band. Potentially, it was kind of an 80s super group, if you like, but we wrote a few. I've still got the demos of that, and they're really, really good as well. But unfortunately, John died, and blah blah blah. So but I got this job at a hotel, but it was still doing pretty much what I enjoyed. I really enjoy being in the studio and everything else, and setting up rooms and with PA systems and what have you. So of course, in 2003, I get a phone call at the hotel to say they want to use The Promise, which was, it was dead in the water by this time, especially in the UK. It was not a hit in the UK. I went to 53, I think, in the UK.
But bigger in US.
Sure. And US, of course, it went number one on the dance chart and blah, blah, blah. We've been very, very, going back to your question about whether we've been disappointed, we actually signed to Elektra Records first with The Promise.
Okay.
And we did lots of demos with them for the album and stuff. And for whatever reason, Elektra opened an office in London, and for whatever reason, they moved it back as soon as we signed with them. And Simply Red had signed at the same time to WEA, which was part of Elektra, Warner Elektra Atlantic.
Right.
So Simply Red had signed at exactly the same time as us, and for whatever reason, they closed their offices in London and reverted back to the US. So Andrew and I were stuck back 5,000 miles away, 8-hour difference. So we couldn't really deal with and we didn't really have the best, there's no management dealing with it for us and stuff. So we decided that we wanted out of that deal. So,
well, do you mind me stopping you for a second? I mean, I'm curious about that. So you signed the record with Elektra. You got a WA deal. What are the stipulations of this deal? Because you mentioned wanting out. So how locked in were you to something like this? What was the commitment that you had?
well, you know, the weird thing, it was a bit like the Sex Pistols things, because they signed to Virgin and then signed to EMI and then got off EMI within 3 days, I think. So they took the you know, whatever the advance was. But the point is, with the advances, of course, we got an advance from Elektra, quite a big advance. We look, you know, it made us comfortable for a while, and it was kind of like what do they call it, a retainer.
Sorry,
Bless you.
My allergies are getting me. Pardon me. Thank you.
Bless you.
Okay, so you took the retainer.
We took,
so
from Elektra.
Okay.
But thankfully, Virgin Records was still interested. We couldn't deal with Elektra any longer. It wasn't anything to do with us not being happy with Warner Elektra Atlantic. They're still a fantastic label. I think they're Universal now, but it was nothing to do with us not liking the deal or anything to do with us not being happy with what we were able to do or to write or whatever. You know, we had a free reign on writing, and we did all our demos at this place called That's a great story as well. Cavalier Studios in Stockport is opposite a pub called Blossoms.
Okay.
And there's a new band at the moment who are really massive in the UK from Stockport. And the reason why they call themselves Blossoms is because of this pub.
That pub, okay, cool.
Yeah, so where we used to go when we did our demos and stuff. Anyway, I'm diverting from the question. Elektra Records, we decided we didn't want to be with them anymore because we couldn't deal with the time difference and whatever. Okay. We found out that Mick Clark at God rest his soul, is he was still interested at Virgin Records. So we approached them and said, we're not really happy with the Elektra deal. Are you still interested? This was after doing showcases at a place called Nomis in London. Simon Napier Bell, who managed Duran Duran and a few other 80s bands and stuff, who we never met, weirdly enough. We never really met any of these 80s bands back in Manchester. When we were in Rome in Manchester, still in Manchester, we never met Mike. I met Mike here in America for the first time. You know, we never met in the UK.
That wasn't because of the Manchester-Liverpool rivalry.
We had a bit of there was the rivalry thing, but we loved his record. I mean, Wishing was obviously bigger than I Ran Over in the UK. That was the big record over there. But of course we all bought those records. But anyway, Virgin are still interested, so they do a deal whereby, and we're feeling great. This is the problem. We get the deal on just a verse and a chorus. We'd still not written. I don't think we'd still written, or Andrew had not written that second verse.
Really? Okay.
While we're still negotiating to go from Elektra over to Virgin.
Oh wow. Okay.
So Virgin, for whatever, and we're thinking, wow, they must think a lot of us, because Virgin are now going to say to Elektra, we want When in Rome, and we're going to pay you whatever you've paid them. So what Virgin paid whatever we owed to Elektra,
for the
paid it all off.
Okay, so they cleared your advance.
Cleared our advance with Elektra.
Okay.
And then gave us another advance.
Wow.
And not massive. It didn't keep us going for, you know, I mean, I'm not a millionaire by any chance, but it was enough for us, as young lads. It was, I say young, I was 31 when we had a hit with The Promise. It was, I had my head about me, I guess.
Yeah.
I think if I'd been anything like any of the other bands, if I'd had the success at 18 years of age, it may have gone a different way. And I think coming up through the apprenticeship and doing these working men's clubs and doing this and that and the other, and then not getting the record deal until I'm 31, it was good for me. And this one hit wonder thing, I keep calling it one hit wonder. It's the best scenario for me.
Yeah.
Because we weren't being dragged all over the place, and we weren't having to tour every week and blah, blah, blah. We could kind of relax a little bit and take it easy. But we did do the Whirlwind tour when we first signed to Virgin. They sent us straight away. We had a meeting. We were actually managed by a guy called Alan Mark, who managed Jonathan Ross, who's a really big presenter in the UK. He does all the award ceremonies and stuff like that. Very big. He's a comedian. He has his own talk show over there and everything. Andrew shared a flat with him when we just signed to the record. He was just coming up in the business,
Jonathan
and
was.
became this Jonathan
Okay.
Ross.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason why, and Alan Mark, his manager, managed us as well.
Okay.
And because he was becoming very, very successful, Jonathan Ross was becoming very, very successful. We had a meeting with Alan and said, amicably, we had a really nice chat and said, you know, we realize you're really busy with Jonathan now. We really need to get a new manager.
Okay.
So he said, yep, agree, blah, blah, blah. So we have a meeting with it. We contact our record company and say, can you help us get in a manager? Because what happened was Mike, our keyboard player's cousin, took a 12-inch record. It had been released on a 12-inch vinyl before, but forget New Order and all that. The Blue Monday, when in Rome were first with the 12-inch record.
Really?
No,
I thought that was his mindset.
Yeah. So anyway, Mike's cousin goes to San Francisco. He goes to work in San Francisco. So I say, if you're going over to San Francisco, will you take that with you?
Yeah.
So he takes a 12-inch record with him. Goes to, that was in the days where you could actually walk into a record company. You could go up to reception and say, "Can I give this to one of your DJs?" And you can't do it anymore. You got to get through all the security first, and the cameras will get you and everything else. But you can't do it now. But then you could. Don't even try it. No, don't. You get shot. He hands it to and said, "Can you give this to whoever your big DJ is?" And he said, "Oh, it went like this. We not only will give it to the DJ, we'll get the DJ to come out and get it from you." So he handed it to whoever the top DJ. I should really remember his name, but I don't. I'm going to research it now and find out who the guy was, because he's totally responsible for us having the hit over there.
Really? Okay.
So he, of course, Live 105 start playing it, and this is a British band, new record, blah blah blah. And of course, you know what it's like in America. It's very different. In the UK, you get up the charts by selling records. In America, you get up the charts by being on the radio.
Right.
So we were on the radio. Once it had been played on Live 105, all the big stations then wanted a piece of the action. So I guess that's how we got to number chart and stuff. And then 11 on the major chart, of course. But as far as that, you know, I've not really had any regrets with record labels or wished I'd not signed with them. And the only thing I think I would have liked to have done is signed to Pacific, which was the band that I had with John McGeoch and Glenn Gregory and John Keeble. I would have loved to have signed that to a label, but of course labels now are looking at the next big the bright young thing, if you like, but it was very difficult, even if that you know, Glenn Gregory, the stature of Glenn Gregory, the stature of John McGeoch and John Keeble from Spandau, even with that stature, record labels were very, very not very what do you call it, accepting of signing bands that had been through the mill, if you like.
Yeah,
that probably is my what I don't really have any regrets, but I guess that for a small regret would be that band didn't get signed, and there was not more notoriety for that band.
You know, man, you talk about like the next big or young band, and you mentioned kind of going through the mill, you know, so getting to the point that when in Rome got signed to their deal, I mean, you'd been around for a while. You established yourself as songwriter. You brought Andrew in as a lyricist, and then a contributing sort of partner. Was Mike already playing keyboards at that point as well?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
So, and it was really just the core three of you guys. That was it, right? Everybody's contributing to the music. And you mentioned like Bowie being an influence on you for a bunch of different reasons. And then you mentioned early on in the days, being influenced by like the Jam and doing some other cover stuff. Did you guys have a diverse sort of list of inspiration amongst the three of you guys, or did that, or were you?
That's exactly why the album sounds like it does. You know, the album sounds like a load of different. It sounds like a compilation of different bands, if you like, because we allowed that to happen. You know, whether that was a mistake or not, I don't know. But we were very diplomatic. We split whoever wrote whatever. We split the royalties three ways. We allowed each other our own ideas, and if somebody had a track that they wanted, but Queen did exactly the same thing as well. If you listen to Night at the Opera, each one of the guys have got their own tunes on there. But the great thing about Queen is, though, they sounded like Queen. You know,
Right.
When in Rome didn't really sound like When in Rome throughout that album. Of course, the hit was The Promise, and that was so different to all the other tunes that were on there.
Right.
And weirdly enough, that was the only one that we really had total control on. We actually produced that, even though Ben Rogan, fantastic producer, Richard Burgess, fantastic producer. The Promise is probably one where we produced with them as well, more than any other song. And the other ones were really more influenced, again, by bringing in session musicians, really good session musicians. We had Preston Heyman from Kate Bush playing drums for us.
Right.
On all of the other tracks apart from The Promise, because I'd programmed the drum. That was a funny story as well, because when we did the demo for The Promise, I did it on this little Roland Boss drum machine thing, tiny thing. You know, put that beat
the
down.
Dr. Beat?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I think it was a Dr. Beat.
Nice,
yeah, it was. Or Dr. Rhythm or whatever.
Dr. Rhythm, right? That's
Dr.
right. Yeah.
Rhythm.
Yeah.
So then when it comes to, we get into the studio at Power Plant Studios in London, beautiful studio. I mean, it's no longer there, but of course, a lot of studios have closed down now. But at the time, it was apart from Nick Richards's, which was Maison Rouge. Yeah. So the Maison Rouge and Power Plant were very big rival studios back in the day. We were. I didn't know Nick at that time.
Sure.
I would have recorded at Maison Rouge if I'd have known him, but we were at the Power Plant with Robin Miller. What had happened there was Sade had just released it, or just recorded her album with Robin Miller at Power Plant in London, and we love that sound. You know, we just love the sound of that album. Even if you listen to that album today, it's the one with Smooth Operator on it. I forget what it's called. The album Sade produced just before we went into that studio. We wanted Robin Miller to produce us because we loved that sound of that album.
You bet.
But he'd gone on to other things. He was doing Joe Boxers and all sorts of other bands because of the success of the Sade album. So he wasn't available, but Ben Rogan was. His engineer, who engineered Diamond Life, the album, his engineer was available. So Ben came on board to produce us. And then, of course, we were at a studio, which is again a great. You froze up a little bit there, mate.
Yeah, no, it was my face. It's not Botox. It's just. Sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. So we got Ben Rogan producing us, and then we did all of the music at Power Plant. Then we thought Ben Rogan's idea was to have a change of scenery. So we went to this place called Linford Manor, which was that's a funny story as well, because I got there first. They sent 3 cars to us. We were still living in Manchester. This is what really worked about, going back to how it all started with Andrew and stuff. At the very same time that we got together and we got Andrew in as a lyricist, he decided already that he was going to live in London. Okay. So London is the Hollywood of the UK.
He's
of course.
On
so all the films are done there, all the record companies are there, blah 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 blah. It's all changed now because everything's moved up to a lot of stuff. All the media stuff's moved up to Manchester, but back in the day, the centre of everything was London.
Sure.
And so at the very same time that we'd asked him to join the band, and this is before we even got the name of the band, we were in this project together. And he moved to London. So Mike and I were still writing up in Manchester at my little studio at my mum and dad's house. So the synergy of that, if you like, or the timing of that was absolutely perfect, because he'd gone to London, and he's you know what Andrew's like. He talks he's a talker. He loves talking. Not that he talks too much. He says the right things, if you like, and he's very, very interesting in conversation.
Yeah, he is.
And he got to know all of the record company people and got to know where they hung at. This place called Groucho's in London. There's a bar in London where all the A&R guys went after they'd done the day's work, the 8-hour day. So Andrew would be frequenting this place with the little cassette in his inside pocket.
Just ready to hand that off?
Yeah, ready to go, yeah. And one night, I think Simon Potts gave him a lift home. He was Elektra. This was when we got the Elektra deal, and gave Andrew a lift home. They'd had a drink and what have you, and obviously Simon had stayed sober, and Andrew had had a few drinks, and so Simon offered to give him a lift home. So giving him a lift, he says, "Simon, will you listen to this for me?" And he put it in the days when they had a cassette player in the car, of course. Puts it on and he went, obviously interested straight away, and we got signed off that. So
Oh,
that's how you're talking about luck and stuff. I think that you make your own luck, of course, as well, because that was, for him going to London
right.
and putting himself in the position to be. I think that's the way to do it. That's that. If anybody, any young band, you've got, if anybody's looking after a young band, or any young band who looks after themselves, and you've got to be where it's happening. You've got to be in. It's no good being a great basket weaver and saying, look at my baskets, without taking them to the market.
Right.
And I stole that, by the way, from a guy called Quentin Crispy. That's his thing. He says, it's no good making something great and having it in your home and saying, and all your mates think it's great, but if you want to be successful, you've got to put it out there in the market. So,
well, to that end, how do you think that's changed with social and like the internet technology?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's open to anybody now, isn't it? We're in the age of the where Andy Warhol said we're all going to have 15 minutes of fame. We've got one now.
Yeah.
And if you've got quality stuff, if you've got whatever you do, whether you're singing, whether you're an artist, I mean, you've got a painting at the back there where I could see in a gallery. I mean, we now have the opportunity more than ever to show if we have any kind of talent.
Yeah.
And I think the greatest thing about it is that we are in control of it. But it must be real. It must piss a lot of these artist agents and management off to go, oh, we can't control this anymore. We because it is scary, the fact that somebody can take out. I mean, if you watch the Avicii video, for instance, it's something that you love can soon be something that you don't like, if it's not handled properly. And I think that's what makes us lucky in that respect, being old enough not to we know when we're being bullshitted. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
That's a golden thing, and I think if you can learn that as a young artist, learn that it's not always right what people are telling you.
Right.
Gut instinct is the most important thing.
Oh, the gut thing is so huge, right? You met Caleb several times. My oldest son, who's primed and ready to go to Los Angeles. He's a hip hop artist, and he feels like there's just no way for him to be discovered if he's not in Los Angeles. And you and I have been in this business long enough to know that there's a massive hub for music industry there. But it's not like he can move to Los Angeles, get into that zip code, and walk into a record label or a producer without having. There's a tenacity. There's the ability to make connections and relationship building. When you talk about Andrew doing this, it wasn't just that The Promise was a great song, and it happened to be that Andrew rode home in a car with the A&R rep, but he put himself in a position where he was approachable enough that this A&R guy was staying sober, willing to give Andrew a ride home, willing to listen to what he had to say. Because, people, they're tired of being solicited all day. But if they feel like they're not being sold a bill of goods and there's an authenticity behind the communication, that's really important.
Absolutely.
And he does have that. I mean, that's one thing that you guys share a lot, but it's funny. You talk about the communication style that Andrew has. That dude is one of the most hilarious people I've ever met in my life.
We'll make a bit of joke out about anything, which is that's a real, I think that might be a Manchester thing as well. We are very, very, we do make a joke about, the most mundane things, and in a comfort,
It's crazy.
Very quick as well. Andrew's very, very quick with it as well. And you have to be just as quick. That's the best part about it. You just have to be, right on it with him, and it works with us,
what, Gareth Moulton too, as we know, Gareth,
brilliant.
He's a Manchester guy, and he has that same quality about him. He's
absolutely,
he's humorous and very intelligent. And there was something that happened with Andrew. I was thinking about my friend Mike May, Mike, my buddy that travels with me a lot. We were down in the Dominican Republic. We're having breakfast, and rock stars are littering this breakfast establishment. And the Dominican waiters and waitresses, they're kind of they're used to being belittled by some of the pretentious people that are there. And Andrew's approachable and he's really funny. But this guy walks over and asks, can I get you guys any more coffee? And the guy's name tag says John. And without missing a beat, he goes, John, Bum. He said, John, the bum scum. I'm like, what the hell? And without missing a beat, the guy said, absolutely, sir. And Mike and I look at each other like, John the bum scum. This has got to be some kind of crazy British thing. Where is that from?
I've
The
got
hell is
I've
it?
got no idea. That's an Andrew
but,
one. That's it. But
but
I would get it if it had been there. I'd go, that Andrew. That that's
fucking,
Andrew all over.
he is
Yeah.
the most quirky and hilarious
Yeah,
guy.
and of course he didn't mean that with any
Oh, none of
detriment. He wasn't putting the guy down or anything. It was just like
no.
it just comes out of his, just
Yeah,
comes out,
he does. He just spits.
Yeah.
And he's never been one to be derogatory. He makes everything fun. And so
Absolutely,
I would think early on in those days, that relationship building, as he's talking to A&R guys, I'm sure he used that same sort of just approachable.
Oh, absolutely.
technique.
Yeah.
So
And
A&R guy probably signed him as well, just knowing, what, this is, I could imagine working with this guy and having it be fun. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was good. We kind of, we understood with Mike and I when we were working, because Mike and I were generally the people that were together most of the time writing music, and Andrew being down in London was away from us. And that it really worked in that respect, because and we brought Andrew into the band for the look, apart from him being a great lyricist, he looks great, and he looked great back then as well. He looked even, he had the long hair and everything. He looked the part, if you like, for being in a band.
He looked a lot like Michael Hutchence from NXS at that point.
Absolutely. And it's weird. And it was about the same time that was how, NXS were in the heyday. And I think whether that was to our detriment or not, because of course wherever we toured or wherever we played, you look like Michael Hutchence.
Oh, did he get that a lot?
He got that quite a lot, yeah. And it's but he was brought into the band for that reason and for his lyrical prowess, but it didn't really matter whether he was in the studio or not, because we'd put all the stuff together and make sure it sounded right. Because Andrew's not a techie, he'll tell you that straight away. He's not technical like Mike and I are. And we right back in the day, we had this thing called a Green Gate sequencer. So we were sequencing way before the Ataris came out and Pro 24 and everything else. So massive craft. In Bow Leisure, we took a television apart and played with the tuners to make our own synthesizer. We read this book where you could make your own synthesizer out of a television. Really? Where you actually use the tuners on the valves to make the all that sort of stuff, frequency modulation. That's exactly how a television works, frequency modulation. So we were using that as pretty much like, because Brian Eno's one of my the people that I admire, if you like, and the stuff that he was doing with Roxy Music, apart from him looking the part, he was playing these tapes and slowing tapes down and everything else, and it was such an eye-opener to see. And I think, I was saying that to somebody the other day, I think a lot of that is missing from what's going on right now. And you mentioned the fact that now we've got this chance of, if I saw a band that was anywhere near Roxy Music on YouTube, I'd be very, very interested, because they had all these different characters and stuff like that. And I think the bands that are going to win out or be successful are the ones that put a show together and make it look great. And blah blah blah. I'm still waiting for a lady Kraftwerk. Four girls dressed in white, really, really nice. Like robots and doing a Kraftwerk thing. That had looked so good.
Have you produced bands?
I produced a band from Long Beach a while back, and I produced an Australian band. I produced Johnny Diesel. I don't know whether you've heard of Johnny Diesel. Was massive in Australia at the same time as INXS were. He was probably just as big as INXS in his home territory. His name's Johnny Diesel. I produced a track of his, but it was a real mistake of mine, really. I've made a few mistakes which brought me to not making mistakes, being able to say no, if you know what I mean. It's the record company EMI he was signed to at the time, they wanted a hit in the UK, of course, and Europe. Of course. So Johnny Diesel's massive in Australia on EMI Australia. They bring him over to England to try and get him a hit. And they thought, and this was in the 90s, so it was after the When in Rome stuff and everything else. So 93, 94, something like that. My girlfriend worked for EMI International, and she got me the job of produce or remixing one of his tunes. EMI wanted to get him a hit in the UK and Europe, so they thought 90s big time for dance music. Let's do a dance mix of his big tune, the big tune in Australia. And I'll try and dig it out sometime. But so I'm in the studio, and foolishly, I said, Johnny. His name wasn't Johnny, but his stage name was Johnny Diesel. But I said, come into the studio on Tuesday and see how we're going on. So I worked all over the weekend up till Monday, and I got really brilliant backing singers in. I put a percussion thing over the top of this record, and it was sounding really good, like a dance tune, proper dance tune. So he comes in on Tuesday, play it to him, and you could see that he's not really happy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he's not very happy. He says, I don't like it. The record company wanted it to be a dance tune. That was my criteria. That's the criteria they gave me. So I'm going away giving it this. I've got this gospel thing going off on it. I've got percussion going on. And it really did sound, the engineers in the studio were saying, this is really sounding great, blah, blah, blah. He comes in on the Tuesday, they met the artist, and he listened to it, and you could see that he didn't take to it. So then he stays with me for the whole of the time for to finish the mix, and it ends up being exactly the same as the hit that he'd got in Australia. So it's exactly the same record. So it goes back to the record company then, and the record company said, well, what's the point?
Right.
We're paying you all this money to do a mix of this guy's tune. What was the point of you bringing it back exactly the same? And I think that what artists have got it, and there's a really weird story about what's the name as well. Above and Beyond are one of my favourites at the moment. Al Judd works with them a bit. He does a bit of production work for them, and they are probably one of the best live acts right now worldwide. They do the Hollywood Bowl for 3 nights and sell out and everything else. They did a remix of New Order's Blue Monday, and it's fantastic. It's really brilliant. But New Order don't like it.
Oh, really?
But it's really good. It's really good. But that happens a lot. But what the difference between that and the track that I did was that New Order had really, although they gave it their blessing, they had nothing to do with being in the studio and stuff. So Above and Beyond come back with a really, in my eyes, a really very, or in my ears, a very, very good mix of this tune. The mistake I made was allowing the artist in, and what you got to say is, please stay at home. I'll do the remix. If you don't like it afterwards, then so be it. But if the record company want to release it, so be it as well.
Right. That's
you can't really bring it. You can't really make it the same record as you've already done. It's going to be so totally different.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Exactly.
Yeah. And hard to be objective as the artist too. Right?
Absolutely. Well, especially when you put the ingredients together in the first place, it's very difficult. But I would, I'm really open to all of that stuff. And it's really, obviously there's been a few mixes of The Promise and stuff, but nobody's really hit the button as a dance mix. Nobody's really hit although that's arguable, if you like. For me, I don't think that it's been hit, and I don't think it is. And I think the answer to that would be that it's actually a song more than a dance song. The lyrics mean a lot more than the song, or just as important as the song. Sure. And I think when you're trying to put a driving dance beat behind it, you lose a lot of the content and stuff. And I think that's probably why it's not been. In my book, nobody's really hit the mark.
I like that analysis. That I'm guilty when I listen to music. I've said this before. It's a horrible quality that I listen to melody before I listen to lyrics. Lyrics are always a secondary thing to me. Yeah. And so I'm guilty of not having listened to the lyrics of The Promise until we were all touring together. I'd hear the melody and I'd sing the song without realizing what the lyrics were. Yeah. And it made so much more sense to me about how important it was to dating teenagers, right? When you're growing up and developing relationships, it made so much more sense to me that this truly was a love song, Yeah. And I'm embarrassed to say that in a lot of ways, but it's an important thing that was a substantive part of the growth of the band, because there was a quality that wasn't vapid and superficial. You know, in the 80s, a lot of the songs were just flighty. They weren't, they were just, they were fluff, with a cute melody behind them, but there was something really special about the lyrics.
Yeah, well, it's because we did it ourselves. The demo was, in my eyes, and Andrew would agree to this as well, the demo was had just as much quality as the final product. We went 48 track. Of course, it was in the day when you brought in two machines, two 2-inch machines, and you hooked them up via SMPTE.
Yeah.
So SMPTE code would run on one part of the tape, on one track of the tape, and tell the other machine to run at the same time. So we recorded all of our album on 48 track, but the demo was done on a TIAC, a little TIAC 4 track.
Tiny.
And it had just as much quality. And I did the vocals on an RE501 Space Echo Roland RE501, which I've got the software version of it. I actually lent it to a guy, Paul Bangosh, who was in Sam Brown's band. I lent it to him. I'm still a mate of his as well. He's still got it, and I never got it back from him. But
give it back.
I know. I keep messaging him. Have you got it still? And no, I'm not bothered really, because I've now got the plug-in version for Logic and stuff. So it's and it's just as good. It really sounds just as good. But I remember it was just fascinating to watch this thing, because it ran on a bed. It ran on a chrome bed, and the tape was about 100 yards long, but it came in a little packet.
Oh my
God! So you
God.
put this packet in the corner of the bed. You lifted a lid, put the packet of tape in the corner, pulled the tape out, and put it around the 5 recording heads.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And it ran around this bed of chrome, and it's great to watch. So you'd be singing, and you see this thing, and you can set it to have the first one recording, the second one to erase it, and the third one to record it again, and it gave you all these weird echoes and stuff. And thankfully, I've got it back again, and that's how we did the vocals on The Promise.
Really? Okay.
We hired that machine again to get that vocal sound in Power Plant. And the same with the drum machine. I was saying about the rhythm, you were saying about the drum beat. I'd recorded that on the rhythm thing, the Boss Rhythm Doctor. And we come to get to the proper studio at the Power Plant, and we hire a Lindrum, which was the machine of the time.
Absolutely.
And of course, I programmed. That was like a bit of a tug of war as well between who's going to program. I did it on the Dr. Rhythm, so I'm going to do it on the Lindrum. So I recorded that or programmed that again in that, and so the full-on recorded version has the Lindrum on it. Which again, I've got the plugin for the Lindrum, which is perfect. The sounds are perfect.
Yeah.
Again, so I can recreate that if I want to do another Promise that when I'm ready in another 10 years probably.
I've got all those samples in as well, because we when we play live with Flock, right, I'm triggering I've got triggers set up on the acoustic drums, so I'm triggering Lin samples off of the kick and snare toms, all the Lin drum sounds, so I get kind of a stacked hybrid. But it's important to have those sounds, right, because people know.
Absolutely. You know what? I think I've heard whether when you were with them, or I don't think you were with them at the time. I've heard Flock whether the machine had broken or whatever, especially on Wishing, because Wishing is the one that's got down,
exactly the gank,
down, and without that, and it's so weird. That's a great example of a song that is made by loads of different parts, apart from of course, the lyrics are important, the melody of the lyrics are important. But what's even as important is that bang and the drum track that goes behind it, and the bass and everything else. And it's and I think that's what we of course we were influenced by Flock of Seagulls and stuff like that. We love their sound. Trevor Horn, Lexicon of Love, Martin Fry, all the Trevor Horn stuff for me. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, massively influenced by them. The sound, the punch of their sound, they had a very, very hard sound, and all of their instruments were just as important as every other one.
As a drummer too, you recognize that the parts as a contribution to the whole of the song are so important.
Absolutely.
But I like that you're talking about the influences, because most of the questions I got for you were the artists that inspired you, other bands that you listened to, and I'd love to talk about a couple of the sort of transitions for you from those days to now. You and I have had some conversations backstage about Freddie Mercury, and I mentioned yesterday I had a great conversation with a friend of mine, and so rock DJ, and we talked about the dream lineup. Like if you were going to put together a show where you had 3 bands on stage right now, from any band from the past, any present band, and it doesn't have to be bands that pair together well, but 3 bands that you would love to see live, maybe that you missed out on ever seeing live before, and your dream venue. And I don't want to just throw that to you off the cuff, but are there some bands that you think, like, because we talked about Queen. I'm a huge Freddie Mercury fan. I think, he's like one of the greatest voices I think the most pure voice in the industry, and I can hear some of that in you. I've heard you warm up, and getting outside the range of you performing live, you've got a really rich depth in your voice that people might not even know about. I mean, where do you get those influences from?
Well, it's obviously listening to those Queen albums, and Brian Ferry and Bowie was the master of it, really, as far as vocal range. I mean, if you listen to, is it Lady Grinning Soul? It start, she'll come, she'll go, and it's just the way that he goes from high to low and stuff. It's and it's, I guess it's listen. You get, if you listen to those things, and if you can sing a little bit, if you listen to those things over and over, which I did, Aladdin Sane was one of those albums that I played over and over and over and over again. You get to know what a great singer sounds like, and Bowie is, and Mercury will actually say that Bowie was influenced him as well, and both of them will say they were influenced each other. So Freddie got a lot from David Bowie as far as the vocal range is concerned and stuff like that. And I listened to those albums, and from modern era, if you like, that Holly Johnson, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, great vocal range, and they were the kind of things that I was listening to, and stuff like Propaganda, and and then Claudia Brucken had a great voice, the lady that sang with Propaganda, and Kate Bush. We were talking about female artists and stuff. Deborah Harry, Kate Bush, really. I mean, for me, the shining star out of all of the female artists, as far as because I like operatics as well, and I guess that's why I like the Queen albums and stuff.
That makes sense.
And I, although I wouldn't say that I'm keen on pure operatics. I mean, I think I love operatics in pop music. I think that's great. But as far as dream venues are concerned, I'd say the Hollywood Bowl, because and I, as you know, I keep up with a lot of the modern stuff as well. And of course, if you go to see a concert, I would definitely recommend going to the Hollywood Bowl and watching Above and Beyond, because especially their acoustic, which they were supposed to be doing it this year again. But obviously it's been postponed until next year. They put a post up on their site the other day saying that it's all postponed until next year, which means that their production's going to be just fantastic. They have guest singers coming. I'm waiting for them to ask me to come along. I'd love to do a song with them.
Really? Yeah.
To just come up on stage and do it at the Hollywood Bowl. So that would be my dream thing. I would have loved to have seen Landscape, which was Richard James Burgess's band. They influenced me quite a lot. I remember buying their album, and they had a song called Einstein a Go-Go, and Richard Burgess was the drummer in this band and the singer from New Zealand.
Okay.
And of course, then we on the album, there's 3 tracks produced by him. So for us, it was for me to have Richard, a guy that had bought his album, because of course that stuff was. For me, it was so different. They were obviously influenced by Kraftwerk and all the DAF and all the electronic bands and stuff like that, but made really, really big pop music out of it. And they were from that band were from New Zealand, but they had a big record in the UK and Europe with Einstein a Go-Go, and that's probably the reason why I bought the album. But there's some great stuff. There's a track called Shake the West Awake, which is about like saying, that all our stuff's being manufactured elsewhere. Why can't we, why can't the West be up there with everybody manufacturing stuff and everything? It's a very interesting concepts and everything else. But I was just trying to think of that what I was going to say about going, importance of other musicians. About the greatest example of an importance, for instance, of a drummer, for me, is Simple Minds. Mel Gaynor in Simple Minds makes that work. What's really great about Mel Gaynor is he's so solid, rock solid, and then he'll come up with that big, bit like the Phil Collins thing,
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are signature parts that contribute to the whole of the song
absolutely.
without being over the top.
Yeah, yeah.
It-
And you're waiting for that part. For me, it was like
yeah,
waiting for that. From a rhythm section side of things, I'm waiting for that part, and that's what wakes you up.
yeah.
Waterfront is a great example of that by Simple Mind. Where it's got that driving rhythm, and then
Yeah.
it goes, and it's just fantastic, just brilliant.
Ah, I
And you're
love.
just as good, mate.
Oh no, no, no! But it's fun to have the drum conversation with you because this is
Yeah,
something we never chat about, But
yeah, yeah.
are you a fan of Matt Bellamy and Muse?
I know of them. I'm not a massive, I've not listened to enough of Muse to know anything much about them. But when I do see little snippets of the live concerts, I know that they do some fantastic live shows and stuff. And that for me is very. Muse are a very weird band because they don't really try to be anything apart from doing great music. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of an argument against what I was saying, a stage show and stuff like that. There's no airs and graces with Muse. It's just a great show. Pretty much with like the same with Manic Street Preachers. They're exactly the same thing. They're great musicians. The music sounds great, but they look like just lads that have just come off the street and started playing instruments and stuff. And there is a genre, if you like, of that kind of thing,
Sure.
where you can just go on and play great music without actually. Of course, the light shows and the smoke and everything else makes a great difference. In fact, going back to shows and stuff, EMF. I'm still a friend of James Aitken, who was the frontman of EMF. And at the same time as their single was out, Unbelievable, which was worldwide hit.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. I went to see them at a place called the Apollo on Tottenham Court Road in London.
okay.
And they open with this massive, like you do with the Flock now, you have that orchestral piece at the beginning.
Right.
Well, this was really big stuff. And it was like really shaking the speakers. They had this massive orchestral piece before they come on. So, of course, you're all excited and the room's dark. And then that's what you just said then. It's so, as soon as you hear the rhythm come in, it's still dark, and then you would ow, and that's when the lights come on. So it's ultraviolet lights only.
Wow.
And they've got striped luminous paint all, and like with the ribs done and everything else.
Right.
And then they've got this little, and it's the strobe is even black light as well.
Pulsing. Wow.
Pulsing. So you see and it's like, and the drummers, it looks like a skeleton playing the drum, and it just looks so good, simple but really, really good. And
you're still remembering it.
Absolutely. Well, that was the content for me. That was the best. I've seen Ferry of me really stole it with that, just with that simple thing. And Clash was another one on par with that. Was the Clash, and I saw the Clash at the Apollo on the White Riot tour. So they had this backdrop with the black and white photos with the police, the riots going on at the back.
Wow.
But of course, and then that's how I got into the Ramones, because they played Rocket to Russia just before they came on. So they played the whole album Rocket to Russia. So I bought it the next day.
Really? Okay.
Because it really turned me on to who I'd never heard of before. And I was asking, who's this band that they're playing before they come on? So they played the whole album before the Clash came on.
Wow.
So of course, when the Clash come on, it's all in quadraphonic. It was when quadraphonic was big as well. So you had footsteps all the way around the speakers,
Nice.
until it comes into the center and it's still black. And
get goosebumps thinking about this.
Oh, it's mad. It was mad. So it's still pitch black, but you hear these footsteps, and then the spotlight goes on. It's Joe Strummer at the mic, and somebody at the back of the audience shouts, "Joe Strummer!" And he goes, "Did someone call my name?"
Oh, yes!
It was the best thing. He'd obviously planted somebody at the back of the room just to
right.
shout that, and it was just so well done. God, and I think I saw Muse doing something with the lamp as well. He has a lamp, doesn't he, where he shines it on into the crowd when he does a tune.
That's right. Yep.
All that sort of stuff to me is all part of everything. It's a
show. It's a theatric.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not just the music that's got to be great. It's got to be, you can. I was never into Pink Floyd. Yeah. I was never, but all my friends would go, "Oh, you should obviously, probably doing funny stuff at the same time and listening to these things." And but I never really got into, because I think my attention span isn't I've grown into an attention span, if you like. I've got more of one now than I used to have, and I couldn't wait for things until I saw a documentary about the Harrier jump jet had just come out.
Wow.
And it was an RAF video, and these things were taking off, and we'd never seen anything like it. These aircraft were taking off vertically,
like a helicopter,
and they were playing "Shine On You Crazy Diamond" behind it. That guitar, down, 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 down. Oh,
yeah.
And it was from then on. I thought I'm going to have to listen, but I still really didn't get most of it until I watched 2 documentaries last week. I watched the documentary of the making of Wish You Were Here, and the making of Dark Side of the Moon. And what's really, really interesting about Pink Floyd is that they were not involved with any of the graphics, any of the stage setups, or anything like that. They said, we've done the music, we've created these pieces of music. And they said to Gerald Scarfe, who did all their animations and stuff, and this guy from Sweden called Sven, I forget his surname, he's the guy that's responsible for the Prism. So they said, we've created the music, we want you to give us, what do you think? Listen to that, listen to the stuff, come back to us and give us what you think. So he comes back with this, so Sven comes back with this Prism and says, the band went, yeah, let's go with that. And that's Dark Side of the Moon, and Wish You Were Here as well, with the guy on fire and everything else. And there's a picture where there's a guy diving into a pool, and you just see his feet, and it's a picture, it's as if he's just entering the pool, but he's actually in a pool of mud. And the guy's actually explaining it, the photographer saying this guy had to go with goggles and snorkel in this mud, and it held him up like that, and that's how he took the shot. It took him days to get that shot, that one shot. So that was for me, watching those documentaries was a great lesson in thinking you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know. If you're a great musician, you don't have to know how to do the graphics and stuff like that. If you've got something great to show, you can give it to people that do know how to do that.
Delegate.
So it gives the unions love all that, because you can give people jobs, you know what I mean? That's exactly what we did with this. We just released, of course, the 6-track EP thing. It's a 12-inch purple vinyl. I'm not trying to plug it here, but
no, I want you to, because
but the point is this: we Howard Greenhalgh is a very, very good friend of Andrew's, and he produced he directed the Pet Shop Boys Go West video. He directed and produced all of the Placebo videos. He's done Iron Maiden videos. He did George Michael's Jesus to a Child video. So he's a very, very, very brilliant, top of the mark video director, and best friends with Andrew. So we wanted a picture on the front of this new release, and of course the first person, and he's a photographer as well. So he said, got anything that we can use? Showed us this thing, and straight away we went yes, straight away. So it's those 2 images behind, like it looks like we're behind barbed wire.
Wow.
And so he gave us that, you know, he actually gave us that as an image. Of course, if it became massively successful, we'd look after him, but it's it was an honor for us to actually be able to use that, and it worked so well. And then we were given a picture of the audience, of the orchestra, the Prague Philharmonic, who we did that release with, and we've got that on the back with me and Andrew superimposed over the top of it. So it's
that's a great.
But weirdly enough, but learning from all other bands and stuff like that, I was actually involved with that, and I said to Andrew, can we get Howard to do that? Can we get Howard to give us an image? And he gave us this brilliant image, and I just really, and that is the shot, that on the front, but on the back we got some pictures. Jason DeBoard did the pictures on the back of me and Andrew at the SAP Center in San Jose when we played the SAP Center.
Right, that was a great show.
Yeah, that was with Boy George.
Boy George, yeah. Right, yeah.
That's a great story as well, because after we'd been on, I'm stood just on the runway before you get to the stage, and I'm thinking, I've just been on, everything's cool. And Boy George is just about to go on, but he won't go on until I've gone.
That's right. He wants you out of there, man. Everybody clear the stage. I remember.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I didn't complain. The security led me over to the other side of the stage, but it was a real funny moment, to have just been on stage and then to be shifted out of the way.
The thing was, from what I remember, I didn't feel like it was an entirely like like, this is my space, give me my space. He seems like a really private kind of
Oh,
shy.
absolutely, he is. Yeah,
And,
and he,
and
he didn't. He really didn't know who I was. I've never met him, and so he wouldn't have known who I am. So
but
yeah, I get it. I get it.
do you remember what happened at that show though? When he came on, the monitors were shot. None of his monitors were working. He had in-ears, and they tried to
Wow.
go on, and he tried to start the songs, and he's like, all right, enough. He kept trying to get his ears to work, and the monitor engineer was trying to make it happen. And finally, he just pulled his ears out. He said, all right, everybody, change gears. Guitarist grabs an acoustic guitar, and they went up. Do you remember they started off? They
Do you know
did
what? I missed that. I
oh,
missed
because
all of that because I was
you,
being ushered
yeah, you were
somewhere
being
else.
ushered
I
away.
was being kicked out.
He came on and did 3 songs without any monitors, without any band really. He had, I think the drummers played some percussion, but I do remember the guitarist grabbed an acoustic guitar. The backup singers were going with no monitors. They're just going off the sound they could hear on stage. And I get goosebumps thinking about how
Yeah,
huge his voice was
yeah,
acoustically. Because he had, he just, I love the fact that he wasn't a prima donna and said, screw this, I'm not going on until it's all
yeah,
ready. But
yeah.
it was a great show. And
Hence the reason why he's still around, and it's the same for
amen.
Howard Jones. The same thing.
Yeah.
Howard Jones did it at the Microsoft Theatre as well, where it broke down just before he did "No One Is to Blame."
Right.
I think it was at the Microsoft Theatre, but he did "No One Is to Blame"
Just
live
him.
acoustic, and it
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
like beautiful. His voice was absolutely spot on,
You can
and
see the real talent of those artists,
oh,
I,
absolutely, yeah,
you were talking about the new record actually, and I saw some sample artwork that our friend Nuno put together too. And he said he'd sort of crafted something for you that was kind of a Roxy Music vibe for
yeah.
Showdown, and
Oh yes, yeah.
he just said, I'm interested to hear what like Clive thought about this artwork. You could be critical of it right here because
I mean, I'm sure I told him when he did it, we loved it. I mean, the reason why we used a girl on the front of the When in Rome album is because we were into Roxy music. Andrew and I were into Roxy music.
yeah,
So we wanted to use a girl rather than a picture of the band. And same with the solo stuff as well with Showdown. I just wanted a nice picture, just a really lovely picture that was eye-catching. And I think going back to what I was saying about the Prism on Dark Side of the Moon, which is the biggest selling album of all time, that has this little square prism in the center of it, and everybody looks at and it's a t-shirt, it's everything
iconic.
Else, it's
a brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Nuno really has that style. Really he has a style where he really only needs to hit on that. I don't think he's hit on it with me. But sooner or later he's going to hit on something where a famous artist is going to come to him and say, "What have you got for me?" And then it's going to be boom. But it's so weird. The Pink Floyd thing is a great example of the simplicity of things.
Yeah.
Something that became iconic.
Right.
Yeah, it's really, really very simple. I mean, we can say it's simple. We wouldn't have thought of it, but this guy did. And who knows?
Look at the Nike swoosh or the Apple logo, right? I mean, they're iconic brands.
Yeah, it's madness. Weirdly enough, I was watching something weirdly enough, I was watching something the other day because I do a lot of. Me and the wife have this thing where we swap the remotes and have a choice of tunes on YouTube and stuff. But I was watching something from the 70s. I think it was a punk thing, and the backdrop had an apple, just like the Apple.
But from the 70s.
But from the 70s,
wow.
Way before Apple was in.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so whether they stole that or whatever, I don't know. But it was exactly the same. It was, unless somebody had superimposed it after the fact, I don't know. But it was exactly the same. But the ideas. It's Willie used to say. Willie Hunt, who I spoke to you about, with you about the clothes designer that I used to share a place with, and Andrew's friend. He used to say to me, he says, ideas cost nothing, but they can earn a fortune. So whatever ideas you've got, keep them under your hat until they're ready.
I love that. That sounds like a profound man beyond just his talent.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and became very, very successful because of it. Because it's it's the ideas, it's music. Mozart was not a great writer of music. He did, he did. Of course, he wrote music, but it wasn't all just going like that. It came from here,
right? And
all of those melodies came from up here in the heart.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of knowing how to write music. People make a mistake. I can't write music. That really is a fallacy. you don't have to be able to jot down stuff on 5 bars. It's whatever's up here, if you can actually translate it into, so that's the beauty of what I've got the setup here as well, because I've got access to any sound I want, any piano, and it's all done on a little thing like that. You don't have to have a big piano.
Right.
You have one like that has octaves on it as well. So that thing can be an 88 note keyboard.
Right.
And of course you've got the luxury of being able to overdub things and record things, so I can make myself sound like a really, really good piano player.
Yeah. There's definitely a benefit for sure to using technology now. But
Yeah.
And this doesn't divert from that at all. You were talking about the importance of a show, and I guess I would be remiss to not kind of bring up the resurgence of When in Rome. Speaking of a show, tell me about the phone call that you got to break things off with Napoleon Dynamite.
Well, 2003, I got a phone call from Mike, our ex-keyboard player, and because he's in America, he's living in America by this point. He did the right thing. We should have done exactly what he did. We should have come to if we were going to make any kind of a career out of this industry or out of our record, we should have really made the move. Unfortunately, I was getting. When we first got to America, and we did the first 2 tours, and we stayed on Sunset Boulevard at the Hyatt on Sunset. I was not really into you needed a car to go everywhere. You couldn't walk. I like walking, so you couldn't really walk anywhere.
Nobody walks in LA.
Nobody walks in LA, exactly, and that no truer word.
Right.
And so we were staying at the Hyatt. For me, it was not something. I was kind of homesick a little bit as well. But the nice thing about being, I've got to tell you this: the morning after we arrived at the Hyatt, and we'd stayed overnight, and we got up for breakfast, and they served breakfast on the street back then, and the windows, you could actually open the windows in the hotel back then. And so we're having breakfast, and I heard a noise, and I look up, and it's little Richard hanging out of one of the windows of the hotel. I go, "Good morning." He goes, God bless you, my son." That was my welcome to America.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the so of course we'd done the 2 tours, and we were still together. Everything was cool. And we'd written. We then went to write the second album. So I was sharing a room with Mike, our ex-keyboard player, and let's call him the ex. He's still got his own band going and stuff. Yeah. But he was my friend and my partner in the band, and I shared a room with him and everything else, and we were like brothers, if you like. But it came to the point after we'd done the album that we kind of got a little bit get sick of each other, just like brothers do. You know, we weren't taking each other seriously anymore. Whatever I said, he was not taking. Whatever he said, I was not taking seriously. So Andrew and I decided to part ways with him, and so we didn't go any further with When in Rome. I mean, When in Rome would really put in a hiatus because we didn't have a hit anymore. We'd had the flourish of the hit and for a few years, and no record deal anymore. So, but then we were asked. Andrew and I were asked in 1992. We were asked to do a tour of Brazil. So we got Matt Rowe as our keyboard player, who went on to produce 3 of the big Spice Girls albums. He became a very, very big producer and writer after working with E17 and Tom Watkins, who managed the Pet Shop Boys and everything else. So he was kind of he did his apprenticeship in that school. So he became our new keyboard player on this tour of Brazil.
Okay.
So we get to Brazil, and great story, because I had a little DAT player. I had a DAT machine with the backing tracks on, The Promise, Heaven Knows, and they only wanted 3 tracks. And so we get to Brazil, and one of the first shows that we did was in a place called Sorocaba, which is twinned with Manchester. So we met the mayor. He gave us a writing set to take back to the mayor of Manchester and everything else. It was
It's like a sister city.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. We call them twin cities. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's an industrial place. Manchester is known for industry. That's why the B. I don't know whether you've seen the Manchester sign. It's a B.
No, but
the sign for Manchester, our what do you call it? Our coat of arms is a B. Because we're a working class. It's an industrial town, Manchester.
Okay.
So Sorocaba is also an industrial town. So we met the mayor, blah, blah, blah. So the first gig that we do there, it's in a big stadium and there's 50,000 people there. And it's obviously not been used for a while, this stadium.
Oh, no.
because the story is that the bands that had been there before, like big bands that had been there before, the stuff that arrive at the airport, and there'd not be much left of it by the time it got to the venue. So it'd been flown off somewhere else.
Oh my God.
So we were one of the first bands to tour there after having a few bits of trouble with blah blah blah. But it's the same as Mexico back in the 70s. You know, pop music was the devil, you know, because it was known as the drugs and everything else. But Brazil had its time where they didn't really like pop stars. So we come back and we'd play this 50,000 seater stadium. As soon as they kicked up the PA system, there was the thousands of bats come flying out of the pit. They were obviously homing inside the speakers and stuff. And it's the first time they've kicked them in for a long while. So we come on stage and we got a little tiny Sanyo DAT machine playing the backing tracks, and it comes to The Promise. Of course, the tape breaks. It goes down. Stop. So I walked over to Matt. I said, just play, give me the C, the A, and the F. So he starts playing this really beautiful blah, blah. So I go, if you need a friend, and this massive PA system. And it just went wild. You know, that was it. I mean, it's great experience or great good knowledgeable time to get to know what to do if something like that goes wrong. And as you were saying about Boy George and Howard Jones and stuff, it's being able to work with that. And you know, because first time we toured in America, we were miming, you know. I mean, I'll come out straight with it, because that's what you did back in the day. That's you know, any touring band that had a hit, you mimed to your 7-inch record, and you only did the one song because they didn't want it to sound anything different from the record. They didn't want you to sound slightly out of tune or anything like that. So we did a club tour miming, but we had to learn to do it. I always thought that was wrong, and then I felt pretty bad about it, because thankfully that nobody really paid to come and see us. We were doing showcases, and we weren't really ripping anybody off. We were showcasing the record, but we kind of it always was in the back of my mind that I wanted to do it live. So in 1992, going to Brazil was the time to do it. And the great thing about going to Brazil was that we had a month out there, and we did 2 weeks worth of tour. So we had 2 weeks to mess around, if you like, on Ipanema Beach, which is where I've heard the song for the first time on radio. So we're on the beach, and they tune into this big radio station in Brazil, and of course the song comes on, and
Girl from Ipanema over
what
and over
again. Exactly.
Well, we were just touching on the rediscovery of you, right? So you were
yes.
Right.
So sorry, 2000. Right. So I after all that, I'm putting the background to all of this. So we lose the record deal after. So we'd lost the record deal at the time we went to Brazil, but it was the record company that was kind of sponsoring it. It was EMI Brazil that were doing it. Okay. Virgin UK were involved with it. So even though we didn't have a record deal, we were sent out on tour, sponsored by EMI and Virgin.
Okay.
So they were paying for everything. They paid for management, blah, blah, blah. And we had a really great management team over the tour manager and everything, who really looked after us. So we come back from that, and that was it for When in Romance and the band. We didn't have another hit record. In Brazil, it was still going pretty strong, but back where we're from, it kind of died a death.
Okay.
So it gets to 1999. We parted ways in 1991. With Andrew and I stayed together as a partnership, and Mike went his own way. And so it comes to 1999, where Saskia's born. My daughter's born. So I think I've got to get a proper job. I've not got a record deal anymore. I'm not earning from the industry anymore. So I've got to get a proper job. So I get a job at a hotel in 2001. And it was a good, you know, and obviously that was a very, very important year, because all the stuff went on. The 9/11 stuff, you know, I got the job in 2000. I remember that was a big point at the hotel, because everybody had it on the screens and everything else. So anyway, it gets to 2003. I get a phone call out of the blue from our ex-keyboard player. Very, very nice phone call. Oh, they're interested in doing The Promise in blah, blah, blah. Are you up for it? Absolutely. Yeah, of course. So he phoned me every other day throughout 2003, negotiating this deal and everything else. We got a nice royalty and residuals and everything else. All that's sorted out as contractually, and me talking with Michael and then passing it on to Andrew. And it gets to 2004 and the film's released, and I'm watching television in the morning at 1 o'clock in the morning, watching the MTV Awards, and I knew nothing of what was going on and didn't know the directors. I didn't know anything to do about the film. I knew nothing. And but I'm watching the MTV Film Awards, and Daryl Hannah comes running up on stage, and she says, "Forgive me, I'm out of breath, shouting for Napoleon Dynamite." And I thought, "Oh shit, we got a chance here. We got a bit of a chance. The song that we've been chosen, that somebody's used our song in,
right,
has got a chance of winning the MTV Film Awards, especially if Daryl Hannah's shouting for it." So comes to the top award, and of course it gets called out as being the MTV Film of the Year, and it got loads of different. It got the Sundance Film Festival Film of the Year and everything else. And of course, the rest is history. Apart from the fact that I get to meet all of these guys in San Francisco 10 years later, 2014. The point of all this is that Mike contacted me all the way through 2003, and then of course when the film comes out, and Promise has now got a brand new audience,
right,
and the people that, and a young brand new audience, and people want us to tour in America. Apart from, we didn't know that people wanted to tour us in America. You know, we didn't know anything about it. We thought, oh yeah, that's nice. So, you know, it's nice that they've used the song in the film. We didn't know how big it was. With 5,000 miles away, we're not really getting any more info apart from me talking with Mike all the way through 2003 to negotiating the deal. And of course, then in around all the people at the hotel were coming to me, because of course at hotels they've got a really young staff, if you like. They're all the meeting event staff, which was the department that I worked in. They're all young, and they're all saying, you know, you've got a film. We watched your film last night, and your song's at the end of it. What are you doing here? What are you doing working at the hotel? I says, well, I really have got no clue. I'd really like to pursue something and see if there's anything going on over there. We were not being told how successful it was becoming. So I'm still at the hotel in 2010. Wow. And then I contact, I found out that, of course, that another version of When in Rome was operating in, and not, you know, I'm not blaming anybody or complaining about it. It's something something that I would not have done. I would have contacted the original members and said, let's get something together, let's get sorted out, and blah blah blah. Unfortunately, the agent that signed or was working with them didn't know about us.
Oh wow!
Didn't know that he'd been told that we'd retired and we couldn't sing. We chose to mime on the first tours, and we were given bad press. We were given bad press to Live Nation and everywhere else, and so our name was kind of being thrown in the mud to try and stop us from coming over, if you like. So gets to 2010 when the people at the hotel are saying, you've got to get out, chase that dream while it's happening. You've got another chance of a dream, if you like.
Sure. Round two.
Absolutely. So I contact the agent that was working with the band.
One sec. You froze up for just a second.
Let him know that we was. Sorry, mate. I contacted the agent that was involved with the Mike's version of the band and said, we're not trying to throw eggs at anybody here, but we want you to know that we are still available. We're still into music. We still write music. When in Rome was only put on a hiatus, because there was no success with When in Rome. Of course, you don't do it if you've got no success. It's not, you don't keep throwing stuff at if you're not got the success. But we do now have another chance of making it, making something of the fact that they used the song in Napoleon Dynamite. So I contact the agent, and he sent me one message. I was told you'd retired. I told you couldn't do it. You didn't want to do it. Blah blah blah. So I said, no, we still want to do it. And thankfully, that agent reached out to us and said, if you want to do it, let's do it. So in 2011, in fact, I joined a studio. I was kind of, they call it headhunted, I guess, at the hotel. A guy that was opening a studio in Cheshire, beautiful. They'd bought a manor house, a really beautiful old country manor house. They paid $1 million for it, and it was a shell. We got in there and squatters had been in there. There was writing all over the walls and everything else. It was just a shell. It was a wreck inside. And I was responsible. I was brought on to oversee the build of a brand new recording studio. And we fitted it out. I've got a company called the Studio People, who are fantastic. If you do a search on the internet for the Studio People, they are the premier studio builders in the UK.
Okay.
They came on board to actually do all the fitting and the soundproofing and everything else. We had all this stone imported for the floors and everything else. And I was responsible for, I was studio manager, and also responsible for what was going in there, all the speaker systems and mixing desk. I got the SSL 924, I think it's called, the mixing desk, and ADAM speakers, all 5.1, because we were having there was a film studio being built just up the road. As the studio was being built, I thought, let's get into post-production as well as recording bands. Let's do film stuff here as well. That was my end goal for that studio, if you like. So we had 5.1 ADAMs studio, or the master studio. The actual control room was absolutely stunning. And we had all these rooms that you could patch from to up into the main control room, so you could record live bands and everything else. So that was a great experience for me. Just before I decided, I thought, I'm at the studio, and I kind of wasn't, I like to know what I'm not a controlling person, but I like to be in control of what's going on. And I'd kind of outstayed my welcome at the studio. If you look, like, I saw it right to the end till it opened, and then thought, I've got to try and do something over here, because the agent that I'd contacted said, if you want to do some work, let's do it. And so in 2011, Andrew and I came over, and we started doing work with said agent, and the rest is history, as it were.
Man, I mean, really, it's been about a decade. It's almost 10 years. Yeah, it's amazing, because I think I met you just right around that time.
And the shame, of course, the shame of it is that we do have two bands, and there is a When in Rome 2, and there's us, and we have to call ourselves Farrington and Man, original members of When in Rome UK, which nobody wants to put on a poster because it's too big. But it's kind of it's not really sour grape. I mean, people might think it's sour grape. It's nothing to do with sour grapes. I think that we've not been given the best shot that we can have done. All of us,
right?
I mean,
right.
Our ex-keyboard player as well has not been given the best shot, because the best shot would have been for all three of us to get together, which we've done on many occasions. We've actually reached out and said, let's get it together. Let's bang our heads together and let's get it together. Let's tour. Let's get us back on tour as the original band. And unfortunately, it's fallen on deaf ears. And, what's best for all of us, unfortunately, is not, I don't think he's ever going to happen.
We've seen that story happen from bands in the past, right?
Yeah.
And my own included, as not being an original member of A Flock of Seagulls, there's a rift of fans that really are guarded about appreciating a newer version, anything like that. And I'm such a fan of the music and a fan of the original band that I'm not offended by it. I really don't take any offense when people belittle me, when I see something about, whatever. It's not A Flock of Seagulls. I'm honored to be playing these songs. And really, for me, I never, ever take it for granted, because I'm such a fan of the music that I just appreciate being there and being part of it and doing whatever I can to contribute.
Yeah.
I don't see any sour grapes from you when you're, people might think peripherally, right, that there's got to be so much bad blood that, people are at each other's throats. I've known you guys long enough to know that you appreciate every opportunity, even if you've not been given the best fair shake. You're doing the best you can with what you've got. And really, I mean, you've never been one to sort of give it less than for the audience. It's a remarkable thing to see that, you and Andrew shine as prominent front people.
I think the difference between us and Flock of Seagulls is the fact that Mike is very, very open about it all. He's nobody thinks it's the original band. Nobody, you don't come across, the original Flock of Seagulls.
Right.
Unfortunately, we do have that going on. The one side of this says they're the original.
Oh, right.
And the
Yeah.
originals say that they're the original. You know,
Right.
it's a very, very, it's a very, very weird situation. But everybody knows that come to see a flock of seagulls that it's a new, revamped flock of seagulls. It doesn't feel like, and it's one of those things. If you know, for instance, for me, if you take an example of Genesis, Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins,
Right.
the real Genesis is with Peter Gabriel. So
Right.
Peter Gabriel could have gone off and said, "I am Genesis,"
Right.
and he didn't.
Right.
I don't know whether he was still mates with Phil Collins or whatever happened, but Phil Collins, of course, remained in Genesis, and Peter Gabriel went as a solo artist. And I think that bands as iconic as Flock of Seagulls, who have an iconic frontman like Mike, can do that.
Right.
Can do that kind of thing. And if you look at any of Peter Gabriel's concerts, for instance, even though it's not Genesis, all of those guys are absolutely the best musicians that you can have around you.
Absolutely.
And everybody goes to see those musicians as well as Peter Gabriel.
Sure.
And Peter Gabriel involves all of those people as well. You know, you can see it in the live performances. He dances with them and everything. And it's such a brilliant, brilliant thing to watch. You know, I've been watching his videos over the past few weeks, and you know, the stage shows and everything are just so brilliant. And of
Secret
course,
World Live.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's my
You
favorite.
tell me the musicians on that. The drummer, who's the
Manu Katché.
Yeah, and the bass player. What's
Tony Levin.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, Paula Cole. Even Paula
singing.
I honestly, that's my favorite live album of all time.
Really?
It really sonically.
I'd not seen it until last week. And it kind of, and it made, I know I've always been a fan of Peter Gabriel, but it kind of made me more of a fan because, you know, he does the job, doesn't it? Talking Heads, the same thing. David Byrne with Talking Heads. If you want, I mean, you know the movie Stop Making Sense.
Right.
You know that's how to put a concert on. You know, and how to gel with all your the other artists that are on stage, and the way that they move together so brilliantly. And it's
true.
You know, and it's choreographed. It's actually work. It's not, they don't just jump up on stage and it all works where they're all work. They go into rehearsal and they say, at this point where the bass player does that, we need to start moving to the left, or you know, and it's all done properly. And but for the paying audience, they just think it's just a freaking beautiful, brilliant show.
Right. It's all subconscious stuff that actually lends itself to enhance the performance, enhance the show.
Absolutely.
You know, one thing that I hadn't tried to do was sort of fan those flames or anything. You know, we talk about the disconnect between the band members, but I think what I was kind of wanting to get to was looking at a resurgence for you guys. You know, I think I love the idea that you're working in a hotel and American success from the film industry brings about a new attention to the band, you know, so many years later, right? And you talk about the new audience because Saskia had just been born.
Yep.
And my son at the same time, my oldest son, Caleb, was born at that same time. My kids grew up with Napoleon Dynamite. And so, you know, with the fact that you and I became pals right after that, and my kids were coming out to shows and hanging out with you at the shows, it's really funny because they were huge fans of the song without realizing until they stuck around to watch your set that, wait, those are the guys that wrote the songs. I think they'd seen me in so many bands. They might have thought they were watching the cover band, right? Because they hadn't seen the Promise video from back in the day. Yeah. But I know, the fact that your personalities were so approachable, you know, I remember shows early on where you'd take my kiddo and back at the green room, you know, go to the catering table, you know, and just have a bite and involve my kids in conversation.
Yeah.
Just the way that, you know, you'll have Saskia come backstage and Shelly when she's there, you know, your family is really involved and you know, your life as well. And
absolutely.
I mean, you know, like, please do give Shelly a squeeze for me. She's
will do. Yes.
Such a sweet woman, man.
Yeah, she is. She's
so supportive of you.
Yeah. Yeah. She's leveled me out quite a lot. You know, I mean, it's you know, you can get lost in this industry quite a bit, and you know, you've got to have a home life. And you know, I thought I was going to be a bachelor for the rest of my life until I got married 2 years ago to the right person, if you like. And you know, it takes a while. You know, sometimes it takes a lot longer than most people. You know, most people to actually find that relationship where you're in sync with each other. We all, cooking together is unbelievable, especially now because we've got more time to do it. I mean, if we had I've noticed that people are posting cookery shows. If we posted ours, maybe if we put a camera there, it wouldn't work. But if there was a hidden camera there and we didn't know, it'd make the most fantastic show. It's just like we work so well together. It's like,
really,
before I get to the cupboard for something, the cupboard will be open. It's brilliant. It's really cool.
That's a good, what I would say, set up a camera, look back over the footage. You can edit that together. This may be your new, because we're all stuck at home for a while, right?
And of course I've had plenty of chat, and I've worked, of course, because working in hotels and I've worked in restaurants, I've done commis chef work and all sorts of stuff. So I know a little bit about food, and I've become a little bit better now that the quarantine's on, because of course there's more time to do it. And the best thing that I bought, I think, is the smoker. We just bought a smoker a couple of weeks ago, and it's been in constant use. So I've been putting ribs in there and beef and
are you
all
using
sorts of stuff.
A Traeger?
Huh?
Are you using a Traeger?
It's called a master built. It's like a big oven that goes out in the back garden, and you put the smoke below it, and a water tray to keep the moisture in and everything else. But it cooks things. You do like a piece of beef over 3 hours. It's especially with Rogue Valley rub on it.
Oh, Rogue Valley rub. There's your promo.
That's up towards your neck of the woods, isn't it?
Rogue Valley. It's an Oregon thing. But I think one of the questions that people had was finding ways to occupy your time while we're doing the quarantine. I mean, cooking, you and Shelley doing some cooking. Yeah,
that's one of them. But I mean, again, and of course, I try to do this like a business now. I mean, not necessarily. I'm in the studio in business hours, if you like. So it's Monday to Friday, 10 o'clock till say 5 o'clock. I'm in the studio most days, and the beauty of having all this stuff and having Logic. I mean, for me, this technology is fantastic, especially Logic and Pro Tools and all them kind of things, and the actual plugins that you can buy for that. I'm actually now becoming a little bit of an expert on plugins, because of course, you even expect, when they come up with £300 and it does this, $300 and it does this, that, and the other. I want it to do that. I want to hear what it does. So I go, oh yeah, that's worth it. So I've spent quite a bit of money in the quarantine on buying all this new fangled plugins for Logic and stuff. Really? So I got one called Spectrasonics. Is it Spectrasonics Omnisphere?
Okay.
And it has about 3,000, and it sounds that it has these really, really deep set pad sounds and stuff, which is what I've always been missing, that bit to give the track a bit of depth and warmth and stuff like that. So it has these really weird, and it has some great sequences in and stuff like that. Then I've got the Autoria, which has all the old Moog sounds in it and Moog sequences and all sorts of stuff. So it's like being in a toy shop for me every day. And of course, now there's more chance to do it. Yeah. But then, of course, I give myself enough time to be able to cook the dinner, and we cook the dinner together, and we have breakfast together and have a coffee together in the morning before I come in here. And of course, Shelley's she's a teacher, so she does a lot of tutoring online, doing exactly what we're doing now. She does the Zoom thing and as well. So she has about 12 or 15 kids on, tutoring them and stuff.
What a change, right, for teaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
My youngest is graduating high school, in a week and a half, and I talked to his teachers a bit about that adaptation that they've had to make to use distance learning as a new shift. And I would bet Shelley's, life has sort of been turned on its ear a little bit.
Well, we were talking about this way before all this happened at the beginning of the year, end of last year. I was saying, you need to get yourself a website together and do online tutoring. And we've always been talking about it, never really got round to it and stuff. So unfortunately, we were thrown into it without, this was bound to happen. It just happened a lot quicker than we really wanted it to happen, if you like. And whether it's going to be, I can only see it as being a good thing, because I look at it from the positive side of things. And I think communicating with people is very, very important.
Yeah.
Fighting with people is not.
Yeah.
So So it's like, if people can learn to get along, that's why I don't really like this internet policing of people. You should be doing this, you should be doing that. And then news in the morning of how many people have died and blah, blah, blah. Of course, we need to know, and it's really very, very important. But, when they never put that on the morning news about, the conflicts that are happening around the world, people dying in conflicts and stuff, if people knew what was happening every day, maybe people would stop doing it,
Or maybe if the news reported on positive aspects of people working together, communicating again.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we lost with Top of the Pops and your Saturday night shows that you had in America. We lost some of that, people having fun together, even though they weren't together, everybody tuned into Top of the Pops on a Thursday night. And it was a thing that you all did. You knew that all your friends were doing it as well, even though we didn't have this.
Yeah.
We all knew that we were watching Top of the Pops and we were watching the next big thing.
Yeah.
And for me, I hope that what's happening now forces us back into that situation, because nobody will get to know new music. I found a band out from have you watched Movie 43?
No.
There's a movie called Movie 43. I think it was made in 2013 or something like that. And there's a band there's a tune on it, and I had to Shazam it to find out what it was. And it's a Brosco, I think they call the band.
Okay.
And it's a brilliant song that I'd never heard of.
Really?
And the reason why I've not heard of it is because there's nobody telling me about it.
Yeah.
And I think that Top of the Pops and bandstand, Saturday night bandstand in America, and all the pop shows, they're what's missing from now, because people don't know what's going on without being told what's going on. Right. What was really popular back in the day, we had breakfast show which covered music as well. So you'd wake up in the morning, a brand new artist would be showcased. So you'd know all about this new artist, and people were kept up to date with it. And I think it's become now, because people only search for what they want to search for, they don't know really what's good or bad. They only know what they like
and what they're being served.
Absolutely,
like force fed. Absolutely,
and I've mentioned this to people before, and they said, "Don't be a fool. That's never going to come back." But I think it's going to it's going to be forced back, because people will want it. People want to know what's going on new. What was great about the shows in the UK, and I'm sure it was here as well, that was that you had these shows that were really topical, that they'd cover everything, or fashion, music, everything, all the new stuff that was happening. And we were glued to it, learning stuff. You don't really learn anything from this, because you're only learning what you want to learn.
Right. Yeah.
That's really. If I watch, people ask what I do on my passport. I love documentaries as well. I mentioned the Pink Floyd ones. What's really great about that is I was not really into Pink Floyd back in the day, but I kind of am now, because I've learned a little bit about the people that were in it, blah, blah, blah. And their story's pretty much they went like the When in Rome story as well. There was two versions of Pink Floyd and everything else. So I'm just hoping that I actually tried to launch one. I did I think it was GoFundMe thing that we did, and I had a video made. It cost me $8,000 to get this thing together, to actually try and launch a brand new show, because we had this show called The Hitman and Her back in the day when the club scene was going on through the 90s. This guy Pete Waterman, who owned Stock Aitken and Waterman, who produced all the Kylie Minogue stuff, and he produced loads of big UK artists and had many hits. Stock Aitken and Waterman, the team, he was actually part of, but he also had this thing on a Saturday night. He did a show from a different club every week on a Saturday night. He'd be stood by the DJ and saying, "What are you going to play next, mate? What's the next tune?" And he'd have a girl, Michaela Strachan, a lady who's big in the UK as well. She'd be out in the audience and talking to people and saying, that's what I said to Steve right at the beginning of 80s in the Sand. I said, you need somebody that's walking around the resort with a microphone, asking people, blah, blah, blah. And you have somebody up on the stage as well that's actually communicating with the people that's on the stage.
Right.
So you get so Pete Waterman would be up on stage saying, "What are you going to play next?" And he'd say, "Michaela, who are you talking to now? Who you got?" He says, "Well, we've got Steve and we've got Mike and we've got Jennifer from Halifax. They've come all the way from Halifax to the club. And then what do they want to hear?" And blah, blah, blah. So they get the audience involved. And this was a show that went out on a Saturday night, and it came on after 2:00. So people had come home from the clubs, and then they'd be able to carry on watching a club thing going on.
The
And
party
for
never
people that
ends.
can't actually get out to these clubs, it's fascinating. People that can't necessarily get out or don't want to go out, get the atmosphere and can have a beer at home and watch what it's like being in a club and stuff. And I really, 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 I actually went to try and recreate that.
That's a great
And
idea.
I wanted to Richard Blade involved. Obviously, he's a really very, very busy man at the moment. But I think with somebody like Richard Blade doing a show like that, live from LA Live downtown,
Yeah.
where he's involving the audience, talking to the audience, people will want to go. They want to be involved, And then I think that's hopefully that's what we'll come back with.
I love it. Well, I have no doubt that there will be a community sort of involvement, a community sort of based revolution of people that are kind of, sort of rediscovering music again and being a part of this thing collectively.
Yep.
There's really no telling when, but I do believe that you're right. I think it's important that we all kind of group together to do it. I love that you were putting the show together because I'm sure somebody that's watching here has connections in the industry that might be able to help foster that idea more. But I just think from what I've taken from our conversation, just the things that have really worked for you are just continuing to evolve. You're adapting to technology and keep finding ways to keep your mind open. You've been willing to sort of to accept new ideas.
Absolutely.
And like I mentioned at the beginning, that we could all see each other as victims right now,
and
just fall into this trap of saying, "Woe is me! The economy is screwed. Our jobs are gone. I can't go out. I can't be involved in X, Y, or Z." But if you look at the things that you're developing skills for, the things that you're forced to do because of the adversity, and benefit from that.
Absolutely.
I love that. I think it's a really good thing to focus on.
Yeah, when I was in a band called Bow Leisure, I used to write with this guy, Dave Powell. He was the front man and guitarist, and we split up and I carried on a version of Bow Leisure, if you like, and we wrote a song called Leisure Time, which kind of foresaw this situation where nobody would be working, I'm not getting into that point where we think robots are all going to be taking over and stuff like that, but it's become a little bit, technology has meant that there's not as much work as there used to be.
Right.
Jobs that used to be done by human beings are now being taken over by the technology and stuff. So we in that song, we wrote about the time coming where everybody will have all this leisure time and what they're going to do with it. Now, I mean, the lucky thing for me and for you as well, you've got your drums that you can go and blast out on. If you want to lose a bit of, lose yourself somewhere, get on the kit and give it a good hammering. And it's the same with me. Get in the studio and learn things. And there's always something. Technology now. I mean, music technology. There's always something new to learn. There's always something new to buy. There's always something new to play with. And luckily, I've got them. And for me, I'm not a master of any of those trades, of any guitar, drums, bass, or anything. I'm not a master of any of those, but I enjoy playing with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
and I don't try and play like anybody else. I don't watch a video and go, I want to play like Johnny Marr or whatever. Right. I'll just play it the way that I think it should be played, And I think that's the same with them. I think anybody that wants to do anything, you have to have your own thing. You have to create your own genre. It's all right looking at other people, but I watch Bruce Fox's bass lines and stuff, and he used to watch television without the guitar being plugged in, and he used to have my ear to the soundboard on the bass guitar and just get the vibrations going, And I think it's important to learn how to create something yourself rather than looking at other stuff,
So many great points, man. There, if you were looking for a list of profound statements, for your book on rock and roll, I think we could get that right from this conversation with you, man.
Oh, thank you.
It's just really fun, and I could tell you've spent a lot of time studying history and technology and development of music, and I think I'm excited I'll be talking to Al Judd shortly in
perfect
conversations, and I know he's done a lot of work with you. It'll be fun to talk from his perspective on how he's paired up with you, seeing him out on the road as a tour manager and as a sound guy and as really a wrangler of cats, if you will.
Absolutely. But I love Al because he doesn't stick, he sticks to his gut, he knows what he wants and he sticks to his guns, and anybody, there's any interference with what because he's the sound guy. He's the
Right.
he for you and Wang Chung and blah blah blah. And he's done us sometimes, and I
Yeah.
love it when he does us because we sound great.
Yeah.
I remember he did the Saratoga wine bar. He did all of us. He
Right.
did the sound, and it was probably the best sound of all of the tour on that night.
Yeah.
Which is a real pity. It's a pity that he can't really be involved with all of the other bands because it's all that a lot of politics goes on, but nothing nasty. It's what it is. What it is. He works with Wang Chung generally, and that's why they sound so fantastic when we're on tour and what have you. But it's great when we get the opportunity to be able to have him do our sound and stuff. And what I really really like about it is if somebody comes and says, "Well, it should be like, mate, I'm doing I'm on the desk. You're not on the desk.
Right.
If something goes wrong, they can tell me."
Right.
So I love Al for that. He's a very 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 thorough and he's got his head screwed on and he's very on it. So that was the reason why I asked him to work with us, because he's great at having worked with him after working with him live and working with him in the studio. I mean, this is a very small space and it's very difficult to get on with people in a small space, and I get on with he gets in, gets the backing track. I'll create a backing track, he'll make them sound great, and then I'll go over there and work on the video and stuff, and he would be on his own over here with the headphones on and getting on with his stuff. And I can kind of trust it that when he says, right, I'm ready for you to listen to this, I know that he's going to blow my head off with it, because it's he's got the ears, as they say.
He does. Yeah. He's a great man. I'm glad that he's working with you. Yeah. It'll be fun to see what comes of that.
And what's really what hammers that point home is the fact that he works with Above and Beyond, and their sound is for that. Lost 80s, of course, we're meticulous on wanting to make it sound great and stuff like that. But, when you're doing your 3 nights at the Hollywood Bowl with Above and Beyond, that's something that has to be,
consistent.
No notes dropped, no blah, 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 blah. It's a machine that has to be well oiled and work properly. Whereas, I mean, it's a different thing than the Lost 80s thing, because of what's great about Lost 80s is it's a little bit more organic than that.
Right.
But the fact that Al's been involved with that, and the fact that it absolutely sounds wonderful. Watch any of the Above and Beyond acoustic sets from last year.
Right.
Al was the production manager, and you'll know how bands should be and sound.
Right. Yeah. That's a fantastic endorsement for him. I mean, anybody that knows that there's a reason he's in such high demand, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll be a fun conversation with him.
Absolutely. Good.
I think, boy, you and I could rap at arm's length about so much, but I think I took a lot of positivity from this. I think it's really cool to see how productive you've been. I'm excited that you're going to get some time with Saskia in June. Like, she's coming
June,
next month.
yes, yeah.
And so please give her a squeeze for me. And
I will.
I'm looking forward to it. Sounds like we'll do some fun things with Greg Ross coming up as well.
Fantastic. Yes. I heard about that today. Yes.
That's going to be magical, man. He's still so driven to try and, make really positive things happen musically.
Brilliant.
For all of us, and so
fantastic.
Shout out to Greg for sure. And please tell Andrew that he missed a really good time, and we had a good laugh.
It wouldn't have been anywhere near as good as this with Andrew.
Well,
no, it would have been better, because we really do bounce off each other. It's cool.
Well, we'll do that as a part 2.
But we should do it getting ready, and I think it's only because it was a little bit late there, and he wanted to get an early night and stuff. So definitely for the next one, let's set it up, because it'll be a proper laugh then.
It'll be good, and that's the best we get, you and I, until we can be on stage again together. So I really appreciate you hanging out with me, man.
Thank you so much, mate. It's lovely to see you, mate. Thank you, and I can't wait to get back in that green room again, mate.
Me too. Where the cameras go off and we're just hanging again.
Oh, absolutely.
I love you, my friend.
And you.
All right, man. Give my best to your family, okay?
And yours.
I'll see you, my friend.
Cheers, mate. Thank you so much.
You got it, buddy. Peace.
Thank you. Peace, man.